the Industrial Revolution of the Mage Lord. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction. So please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story in all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter. And if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 201, Sending You 1,000 Miles Away. Archmage Phil Holden came hurtling towards them, a trail of sparks and lightning in his wake, leaving a fiery trail of flames in the air. He rushed close and hovered in midair, glancing at Harvey, who was trying to escape on the ground. He ignored him and instead taunted the violent snow tornado with a blunt, mocking tone. What? Are all the people in the combat department cowards? You dare to do things but not take responsibility, and don't want to show your identities, right? The spellcaster, hidden in the snow tornado, demanded in a hoarse voice. Phil Holden, what are you doing here? Even your nominal position in the Federation has been snatched away by Lord Sarath. Phil's face flushed immediately, his thick, messy red hair flowing in the wind. He shouted angrily, bullshit. He looked down at the carriage frozen in ice on the ground and said in disbelief, am I too late? Damn it. If I had known that guy had exhausted his magic power, I shouldn't have followed him secretly. I should have sent him directly to Orland. He frantically yanked at his hair, clasping his hands together and rapidly casting a spell. A blazing flame erupted from his body, and he slammed headfirst into the floating icy tornado. Damn it. If that's the case, you'll be buried with me. 8th ring improved fire spell, Blazing Fire Blast. A typical high-level fire mage using this spell would utilize a magical instrument with a fire affinity as a carrier, manipulating the instrument imbued with the spirit of blazing fire to attack the enemy. However, Phil Holden, possessing an extremely violent nature, leveraged his enhanced body and used his torso as a carrier for the magical instrument, launching a physical collision with the enemy. The icy tornado suddenly collapsed inward, then exploded with a bang, transforming into countless slender ice strands that flew towards Phil, attempting to entangle him and delay him. But the Son of Fire showed no fear. 2 blazing orange-yellow rays flashed from his eyes, and the blazing flames on his body turned a dark red. Dozens of fluttering firebirds flew out from them, swiftly devouring and melting the ice threads with their pecks and claws. With a resounding bang, the earth seemed to tremble. Even the air distorted slightly where the 2 high-level elemental mages collided in midair. The collapsing ice tornado finally dissipated, revealing the attacker, clad in a black robe and cloak. He spat out a mouthful of ice-shard blood and staggered to the ground. The Son of Fire landed in front of him, his crimson robes and upper body covered in a thin layer of ice. A bluish-black frost coated the left side of his face, and even his left eye was pale from the extreme cold. Ah! My eye, he wailed loudly, but his body didn't tremble at all. He raised his hand to shake off the ice and snow covering his arm, and carelessly dug out his frozen eyeball. Wayne and Tommy, huddled nearby, preparing to fire another shot, frightened and sat on the ground, their mouths open, unable to speak. Fair walked over to the unconscious attacker lying on the ground and kicked him in the head with a snap like a frozen watermelon, crushing his skull. Blood gushed from the headless corpse's neck, mixing with the grayish-white brain matter on the ground, forming a mess. I told you to be buried with me, so you did. You insisted on struggling here, forcing me to ask Brother Quinn for another eye. He muttered something under his breath, turned his head to look at the frozen carriage, and with a fireball, shattered it, revealing the completely frozen and lifeless puppet body inside. Oh God, it's all my fault. Now the whole forum will know that we lost a valuable member because of my poor protection. This guy is so talented. Simply, Harvey moved behind Mr. Son of Flame and said cautiously, oh, Mr. Son of Flame, I'm sorry, actually. I am Kilthuzid. Phil's throat was choked and he started coughing violently. He turned around and said in a daze, you are Kilthuzid? But the person I met in the Hall of Truth was clearly this ice lump. What's going on? Harvey smiled and said, thanks to your hints and reminders from you and Mr. Shield, I used the illusion pupil provided by Mr. Shadow Knight to swap my appearance and my assistance. Phil laughed when he heard this, patted Harvey on the shoulder and praised, damn, you are really sinister in studying spellcasters. Your brain is really smart. He then added apologetically, Alice, if I had known you were so weak you couldn't even cast the flight spell, I would have escorted you directly to Orland. Now, the carriage is gone, and I have to carry you on my back. It's such a long journey, there's no way we can make it all the way to Orland. Harvey didn't dare explain that he couldn't fly at all. A mid-level spellcaster's spell ring didn't require abundant mana to cast a flying spell. He could only cough awkwardly and politely decline the Son of Fire's offer to be his flying mount. Did you return to the Hall of Truth with Mr. Shield? Why are you rushing to see me again? Fell scratched his head and said calmly, although our relationship has broken down, he occasionally gives me instructions, and I still need to obey. It's basic student etiquette. Harvey was stunned. Teacher? Who is your teacher? Is he also a member of the Forum? Fell turned sideways, casually discarding the frozen eyeball in his hand. He said calmly, who else could it be? Of course, the venerable legendary chief, His Excellency the Scorching Lord. In the end, Harvey, relying on Wayne's back, chatted with his Son of Flame all the way to the nearest post town Trilea. There, he hired a carriage and arrived in Orland. Standing at the gate of the Orland Spellcaster Union branch, the Son of Flame said he would take Harvey there. From then on, he only needed to use the Union's internal continental teleportation array to reach the Wizard Kingdom of Danius, which would basically guarantee Harvey's safety. Dwys is my hometown. There are many officials and spellcasters in the Federation branch over there, all of whom are descendants of the same wizard family as me. If you bring my seal and emblem, they will naturally keep your itinerary secret. Harvey felt warm in his heart and couldn't help asking, Mr. Son of Flame, I am very grateful for your help, including my previous help. But the Forum emphasizes the principle of equal exchange. I want to know what price you need me to pay you for doing this. Fair chuckled and winked. Oh. I knew you were a savvy guy. I've been waiting for you to say this for a long time. After looking around, he rubbed his hands with a little excitement, leaned close to Harvey's ear and whispered, that creative spell of yours is so powerful and crackling. It fried Luke or more charred than a roasted suckling pig. Can you teach it to me? Is that a 7-ring spell? Or an 8-ring spell? It doesn't actually trigger basic elements, but the power of thunder and lightning derived from the wind element. What a genius idea. He paused, then added somewhat embarrassedly, of course, my helping you once is not enough to exchange for this spell. I will compensate you with some other things. Don't worry, just go back and think about it slowly before asking me. Harvey nodded to show that he understood. After thinking for a moment, he explained in a gentle voice, there is no problem in exchanging it with you, but this spell has not been identified since it was created. I am not sure myself which level it belongs to. If you don't mind, I will consider the value of the additional payment after I publish the paper and it passes the review and evaluation. Fair sat up suddenly and said in disbelief, it hasn't been identified yet? No. It's not a spell you created yourself, right? Chapter 202 A Weird Experimental Accident. After bidding farewell to Mr. Flameson, who was still in shock and muttering incoherently, Harvey, Wayne, and Tommy arrived at the Wizarding Kingdom of Danius via the Continental Teleportation Array. However, Harvey disregarded Fellholden's advice to contact his family members at the Danius branch of the Union. Instead, he opted to work with the Dragonstone Merchant Guild, with whom he had close ties, and secretly left Danius with their caravan, heading directly to Jackdaw Town on the border of St. Varen. There, he met up with Pierce, who had been waiting eagerly in the warehouse, along with the dozens of bloodline warriors he had brought with him. My lord, it seems things are going very well in Alea. I never expected you to return so soon. Harvey nodded, and without a moment's hesitation, he boarded the war beast vehicle hidden in the dense forest at the foot of the mountain. The familiar lands of the southern realms, the lands that had nurtured him for over 20 years, now seemed to Harvey no match for the reassurance of the isolated frontier territory in the north. Only when he safely returned to his own territory could he truly breathe a sigh of relief. Has there been any unexpected incidents in the territory during my week away? Pierce quickly replied, no, everything's going smoothly, both military and municipal, except, he opened and closed his mouth several times, his expression odd, as if he were about to speak. Harvey frowned. Except what? Territory defense and municipal work are both fine. Could it be that there's something wrong with the tunnel boring machine at the North Slope base? There was only one alchemical behemoth transformed from a macrophagum worm, and there was no other worm carrier operating within 100 miles of the frontier territory. If it were scrapped, it would undoubtedly be a severe blow to Harvey. Well, it's not the shield machine at the North Slope base, it's your newly built alchemy laboratory. that Master Chris actually used extremely dangerous dragon flame powder in his experiment without any protective measures, which resulted in a violent explosion in the laboratory. What? He used dragon flame powder for experiments? And without any protective measures? Harvey stood up suddenly, his head almost hitting the metal roof of the war beast. Is Chris still alive? What are the casualties? Pierce answered with some confusion. Fortunately, Mr. Chris suddenly returned to the laboratory late last night after finishing a day's work and carried out the dangerous operation alone. There was no apprentice to assist him at the time. Harvey felt a little relieved. Not only Chris himself, but those alchemy apprentices as young as him were the technical backbone of various industrial positions in the territory in the future. If any of them were lost, he would be embarrassed to ask Mr. Man in the Mirror for people again. You know, it takes nearly 10 years from enlightenment to entry to train an alchemy apprentice. After ordering everyone back to the territory, Harvey didn't even bother returning to the castle to rest. He rushed directly to the alchemy laboratory next to the territory's infirmary, finally feeling relieved. The explosion didn't appear to be as severe as he'd imagined. At least the concrete walls of the laboratory hadn't collapsed. Only the glass in the ventilation and lighting louvers on the walls and ceiling had been shattered. Several dusty alchemy apprentices rushed to Harvey's side, crying in panic, "Lord, how is Mr. Chris? I heard he's seriously injured. Is he in danger of death?" The guards stopped these helpless children, preventing them from venturing into the devastated laboratory to save precious alchemical materials. Although the fire caused by the explosion had been extinguished, the remaining hazardous materials still posed an unknown time bomb. Chris was carried out of the fire by the police officers who were on night patrol after hearing the loud explosion. He is still alive, but Pierce's tone was a little low when he said this. His left arm and legs were blown off on the spot. He was sent to the infirmary and was treated by Mr. Egno himself. He barely saved his life, Harvey said in a deep voice. As long as he's alive, it's okay. Even if his hands and feet are blown off, Egno can use healing magic to replant the severed limbs. It's not a big problem. Superintendent Yurio, who was guarding the scene of the accident and maintaining order, came over and whispered, "Sir, I asked the police officers to risk entering the laboratory and search for a long time, but they didn't find Sir Chris's limbs at all. Could it be that he was directly blown to pieces?" Harvey choked suddenly, sighed and shook his head. "Forget it. Let's go directly to the infirmary. Let me see Chris's condition." Alchemist Chris Bird was lying in a separate treatment room of the infirmary, covered with scars, and his body was wrapped in various healing dressings developed by Egno. He looked like a broken rag doll. His face was a bloody mess, with dragon flames covering nearly half his face. He had lost sight in one eye from the blast, and surgery had just been performed to remove the shattered eyeball. His left arm was severely injured, with only the upper arm remaining, and both legs were missing from the knees. If it weren't for the dedicated efforts of Egno, a nature spellcaster, he would have been swiftly killed by the bleeding and subsequent infection, even if he hadn't been burned to a crisp at the explosion. Chris had recently taken a painkiller and fallen asleep, and Harvey was anxious to question him about the cause of the accident. Instead, he turned and walked into Egno's lounge. "It's not difficult to save his life since we haven't found his shattered limbs. But if we want him to continue working with healthy limbs as before, I'm afraid we can only use soul suture and alchemical prosthetic transplantation." Harvey nodded, feeling that there was no other choice. He couldn't help but frown and complained, "Chris is obviously an orthodox alchemist from the Quinn family. How could he be so reckless and negligent? Not only did he conduct experiments alone late at night, but he also didn't make any protective preparations at all." Even a chief high-level alchemist like Mr. Man in the Mirror knew that once entering the alchemy laboratory, at least two brothers should experiment together to take care of each other, and take the most complete protective measures in advance. Egno chuckled bitterly. Most research mages and alchemists who die in their own laboratories are the kind who are incredibly overconfident in their own experimental procedures and predictions about their results. It's like what you often say, those who drown in glacial rivers are often strong swimmers. Last night, he'd been dragged from his warm bed and rushed back to the infirmary to treat Chris. He'd used almost all of his magic power to unleash healing spells, nearly going into mana exhaustion. Despite taking a ton of restorative potions, he still felt incredibly weak. Thinking of this, the hybrid elf couldn't help but complain. "Mr. Chris is such an experimental lunatic. His hands and feet were blown off. After I gave him a precious life-saving potion, The first thing he said when he woke up was that I shouldn't just suture his severed limbs and perform alchemical prosthetics. He said it was killing two birds with one stone. Harvey's tea, which he'd just taken, gushed out. Egno continued to chatter. I didn't expect Mr. Chris to be so optimistic. He doesn't mind his severe disability at all. Alchemists are indeed people with strong wills. Tisk tisk tisk. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203 Forum Reunion. When Chris, gravely injured, awoke from a deep coma, he found himself lying in the basement laboratory of the Lord's castle. Reiner and Asdalen, two soul alchemy creations, stood to his left and right, seemingly preparing for some experiment. Lord, he called out weakly, unable to conceal the excitement and eagerness on his face. Are you going to perform the body transformation experiment on me immediately? Harvey walked over to him and rolled his eyes, mumbling, it's just a broken leg and an arm. It's not necessary to transfer your entire soul into an alchemical carrier. He paused, frowning sternly. Chris, tell me honestly, why were you alone in the lab performing such dangerous operations so late at night? Harvey was honestly skeptical. Given his mania for life transformation and soul transfer experiments, it wasn't impossible that he had deliberately orchestrated the accident. Chris curled his lips, his expression a little aggrieved and hurt. Sir, you won't suspect that I did it on purpose, will you? Although I do desire a soul transfer, but I will never take my life to make such a meaningless gamble. After all, as long as I follow you, one day I will get what I want. Harvey's expression eased a little when he heard this, and he asked in a relaxed tone, then what are you doing? How dare you operate a dangerous flammable and explosive material like dragon fire powder alone? I was inspired by the peculiar alchemical vehicle you developed, the magic car, and wanted to find a substance that can replace liquid magic energy to serve as energy fuel for the magic car. The energy generated by the burning and explosion of dragon fire, to a certain extent, Harvey sighed. To a certain extent, the alchemists of this era have an exploration of knowledge and a spirit of adventure that is no less than the scientific pioneers he had seen in textbooks in his previous life. It's just that they are unfortunately living in a magical world full of extraordinary powers, and too many concepts and cognitions are shackled and hindered by magic. Dragonfire, an alchemical creation whose form and efficacy are identical to gunpowder, could indeed replace gunpowder as a new type of propulsion energy in certain circumstances. Unfortunately, while Chris had thought of this, he still lacked research into the crucial energy conversion method. Harvey's most pressing need was to locate the core of the magical vein, rumored to be buried deep within the Divine Spine Mountains. Only there could it produce large quantities of liquid magic energy, which could replace oil as a power fuel. After you recover from your injury, spare half of your working time to come to my laboratory. I will explain to you in detail why dragonfire cannot replace magic power to drive alchemical vehicles. After that, Harvey pointed to a row of brand new alchemical limbs placed next to Chris's bed, and joked with a comforting tone, okay, before you take the anesthetic and fall into coma, choose a pair of alchemical prosthetic limbs you like for yourself. Reiner immediately introduced to Chris lying on the laboratory table enthusiastically. This is a mechanical arm that integrates the soul of a primate and has the highest degree of flexibility. This pair of mechanical lower limbs is transformed from the soul of a camel and has extremely strong stability. Chris thought for a moment, and tentatively asked Harvey, Sir, why must alchemical prosthetic limbs be made in the form of human limbs? Can I choose to transplant a set of octopus legs similar to the wolf spider beast for myself? He became more and more excited as he spoke, as if forgetting the pain of his broken limbs, and talked incessantly, and arms, like the mechanical tentacles that Mr. Reiner occasionally uses in his experiments are very good, but the number is a little less. I hope to have more than 10 flexible tentacles. A chill ran through Harvey's heart, and he decisively rolled his eyes, rejecting Chris's outrageous request. No. We have to choose humanoid prosthetics. Any other suggestions are outrageous. I reject your request. After completing Chris's limb transplant surgery, Harvey had him carried back to the territory's medical center for further recuperation. After all, it was a major surgery involving 3 limb transplants, and he clearly needed a long period of rest to recover. It was exactly 8:50 p.m., and Harvey, almost forgetting it was Friday and the forum's opening hours, hurried to the magic network teleportation array and returned the legendary artifact, the shape-shifting eye, that the Shadow Knight had lent him. Earlier, while leaving a lair, they had been attacked, and their soul puppet had been completely destroyed by the high-level ice magic. They had to remove the implanted artifact in its eye, and then had Mr. Son of Fire incinerated along with the attacker's headless body and the carriage. Harvey could already foresee that tonight's discussion would be another tumultuous one, undoubtedly centered around his trip to Laia for the sorceress duel. Hand of the Elements. Good evening, everyone. My regards to Mr. Turing. After the familiar opening remarks and pleasantries, the topic of the discussion quickly shifted to Harvey. Son of the Flame, everyone, through your own private channels, you should have already learned the outcome of Mr. Kilthuzid's sorceress duel, right? Son of the Flame, haha, I personally witnessed this spectacular sorceress duel. The high-level spells and casting techniques Mr. Kilthuzid employed were in no way inferior to those of the battle mages hunkered down in the unholy Moon Mountains. As a member of the Spellcaster Forum, I feel honored, Stormwalker, ha ha ha. I've been worried about Mr. Kilthuzid for days, but it seems my worries were unnecessary. Being able to publicly teach a lesson to those traitors within the Union and the Wizard Kingdom who sided with the Church of Light truly gives a huge vent to the anger of those spellcasters who have been innocently persecuted by the Church. Harvey couldn't help but shake his head and chuckle. Mr. Stormrunner's stance was truly extreme, even using the word traitor to describe him. It seems he truly dislikes spellcasters who are close to the Church. For his heart, the Union hasn't revealed the specific details of this spell duel yet. I wonder what high-level spell Mr. Kilthuzid used to defeat the battle mage head-on as a research mage, Frost Giant. From what I know, research mages aren't particularly adept at high-level offensive spells, are they? Could Mr. Kilthuzid be a rare, dual-skill spellcaster? Tisk, T. Frank Spellshield McCollin, an official in the Union's Affairs Department, immediately sensed that these two foreign spellcasters, clearly not affiliated with the Union, seemed to be subtly exploring details about the duel and Kilthuzid. As a seasoned magical politician, he immediately intervened. Spellshield, what? Since when can we openly discuss and explore other members' academic secrets in the forum? Isn't that something every spellcaster has the right to keep private? Please don't ask such rude questions, man in the mirror, it's easy to find out. Following the principle of equivalent exchange, wouldn't it be easier to trade information privately with Mr. Kilthuzid? Simply seeking free money isn't fair. These words from Spellshield and Man in the Mirror were intended, on the one hand, to protect Harvey's true identity and privacy from being revealed, but also to hint to the other members that Kilthuzid was now a member of the Union's faction within the Forum, a form of forced coercion, killing two birds with one stone. As expected of a scheming magical politician, Harvey knitted his brows, not resenting their actions. After all, the members of the Union had shown him unconditional kindness during this trip to Lair, and Mr. Son of Flame had enthusiastically offered his assistance, preventing him from revealing any more secrets or hidden cards. After all, if Harvey were to deal with the attacker, a high-level battle mage, on his own, he would have to rely on Mr. Interdemon's assistance in the magic web to shatter the opponent's magic patterns, which would ultimately lead to Harvey being suspected by all parties. Scorching Overlord, there's no need to argue endlessly about this. Mr. Kilthuzid himself can choose whether to share the details of this magical duel. Chapter 204 Resubmission of the Paper. Harvey sat in front of the magic brain device, pondering for a moment before slowly tapping away. Kilthuzid, this magical duel was truly an unprovoked disaster for me. Alice, I never imagined that simply publishing a research paper would lead to such intense criticism. Regardless, playing the victim first was Harvey's usual tactic in the forums. He had used this tactic in the past to secure numerous research grants from MR Mirror Man. He could also easily obtain discounts on knowledge sharing and item exchanges from other friendly members. It could be said that as long as their own safety and interests were not at stake, these high-level spellcasters active in the forums were quite generous and open-minded in some ways. Kilthuzid, I believe several members, after witnessing this sorcery duel, have realized that I only managed to win by chance because I knew my opponent's information and was able to counter it in advance. I must thank Mr. Shield and Mr. Mirrorman. If you hadn't risked passing on the information to me, I might have been in great danger. Selling out the member who secretly tipped him off was Harvey's small act of revenge for Shield's previous attempts to coerce him. Kilthuzid, as for the spells I used to target and defeat my opponent in this duel were actually two high-level creative spells. They are indeed powerful offensive spells, and they are my only life-saving trump cards. At this moment, a strange member's codename, rarely seen at the exchange meeting, suddenly appeared. Soul Reaper, forgive my intrusion, Mr. Kilthuzid, but I would like to inquire whether the second creative spell you used at that time has a similar structure and model to Dawson's Soul Drain. If you prefer not to share it publicly, I am willing to pay for a private answer. Harvey's spirits perked up, astutely determining that the member codenamed Soul Reaper was most likely one of the Union's chieftains, the legendary mathematical master Soren Dawson, who had sat beneath Mr. Scorching Lord in the Hall of Truth that day. Of course, he couldn't directly acknowledge the connection between the two. That would have exposed him as having access to the Union's uploaded data from the Magic Encyclopedia before it was even publicly released. Would that have directly revealed to the Union's leaders that he had some hidden, close connection with Forum Administrator Turing and Observer Neumann? But outright denial was equally unwise. These legendary spellcasters had exceptionally keen eyes and could easily discern the magical laws and matrix structures inherent in the spell he had performed that day in the duel. Kilthuzid, I haven't had the opportunity to learn the creative spell Dawson's Soul Drain before. After all, it was created by the Union's chieftain, His Excellency Dawson, and I'm not a student. Kilthuzid, furthermore, this creative spell, called Information Rage, isn't something a research-based spellcaster like me could create on my own. I received some knowledge from Mr. Turing, which inspired me to modify and model the spell. Harvey's implication was that while he didn't possess the ability to create such a powerful offensive spell, he had, by paying a price, gained key knowledge from the mysterious and powerful Forum Administrator, Turing. After all, Mr. Turing's rank and power were widely acknowledged by the Forum members as unfathomable. Furthermore, this inhuman being was unusually abiding by the principle of equivalent exchange. While not always accommodating, he was nonetheless generous. As soon as he uttered these words, the Forum fell silent, and all members' minds aroused. If Kilthuzid could, by paying an unknown price, obtain such a powerful creative spell from the mysterious administrator, didn't that mean others could emulate it? Even if it wasn't a complete high-level spell, simply acquiring some relevant knowledge or key points would be immensely beneficial to these high-level spellcasters. Spellcasters capable of creating their own original spells undoubtedly possess the potential to achieve the coveted title of legendary. However, this doesn't mean legendary spellcasters can simply create these powerful high-level spells in large quantities. Creative spells aren't the cheap, mass-produced artifacts found in the alchemy quests workshops. Even a legendary archmage, the Union's chief, can only research and refine a limited number of high-level spells in his lifetime. Take, for example, the Union's first chief, His Excellency Chemo Salis. He is a recognized magical prodigy within the continent's spellcasting community, a talent rarely seen in the Union's century-plus history. Yet, he possesses only 6 original high-level spells, which enabled him to ascend to higher rank and earn the title of legendary. The other 2 less powerful Union leaders, Lord Soren Dawson, possessed 4 original high-level spells, while Lord Wes Gallagher was a special exception. Drawing on a vast legacy of magic from the ancient wizarding kingdom, he conducted frantic experiments in spell refinement and forcibly achieved legendary status through replication. With this in mind, Harvey decided to secretly boost his own Forum status. Since they had already recognized him, he could gain knowledge from Administrator Turing. He might as well take a step further and solidify the other identity he would need later, the Spellcaster Forum's first real-world magical agent, Kilthuzid. Although the magical gifts I received from the Forum came at a great cost, considering your support and selfless assistance during this incident, after consulting Mr. Turing, I intend to share them publicly to a certain extent. I'll complete a paper based on this and publish it through the Federation, so that everyone can participate in the research and analysis. Harvey intends to share only key knowledge points and key theories, not the entire technique, from magical theory to model construction. This is like marking key points for an exam. How much you learn depends entirely on your individual talent and hard work. Earth choose, Mr. Kilthuzid, you are so generous and selfless. I believe you deserve my highest respect. The path of magic is long and winding. Only those who walk the path together can understand the hardships and difficulties. It is through communication and sharing that we all have the opportunity to touch the ultimate truth, hand of the elements. Second, I pay my highest respect to Mr. Kilthuzid's selflessness. Stormwalker, agreed. Thank you, Mr. Kilthuzid, for your selflessness. Harvey, stifling a smile, clicked on the message from Mr. Son of Flame. A wave of anxiety and urgency washed over him. He quickly replied to the irritable mage, who was probably sitting in front of the magic brain, trembling with anxiety, "Kilthuzid, Mr. Son of Flame, please rest assured. I won't share the high-level elemental magic I promised you until you've mastered it. Once my paper is published and the spell's level is assessed, I'll be sure to make a deal with you as soon as possible, Son of Flame, okay. I knew you wouldn't go back on your word. Now, in my eyes, you're my #1 magical friend. My dear Mr. Kilthuzid," Harvey shuddered, sensing that this irritable archmage had completely disregarded his own status and image in pursuit of powerful spells, spouting any cheesy words. After a brief exchange with the other members, Harvey concluded tonight's discussion and exited the magic forum. He took a long written research paper on creative magic, along with reference experiments and actual combat data from magic duels, typed it into a single document, and sent it to Mr. Scorching Lord. Having top-tier connections in the Federation was incredibly easy. Publishing a paper and getting it reviewed didn't require a lot of effort. First-hand information could be submitted directly to the chief without worrying about being held up by the review process. Being able to use connections to publish research results is so cool. Chapter 205, A New Spellcasting Faction. Research on non-basic elemental spellcasting and the application of lightning electric fields in spells. The paper he submitted this time wasn't the widely discussed information-fueled psychic attack similar to Dawson's Soul Drain model at the conference, but rather the first high-level elemental magic used in a duel, invoking lightning power. Scorching Lord Chemo Salas quickly read through a freshly copied paper from the Magic Network forum before falling into a long moment of contemplation. A silver, full-length mirror quietly stood in the study, and the image of a middle-aged black-robed mage slowly emerged. He, too, clutched a stack of documents, his brow furrowed in silence. Dawson, the little old man sitting on the sofa, was the first to break the silence. He said, "A lightning-based creation spell that doesn't use the 4 basic elements, a unique one among the unique ones. It's comparable to Gallagher's shadow spells. What do you think?" The black-robed Chief Gallagher in the mirror pinched his brow and said cautiously, "Combining the force field magic common in arcane spellcasting with the lightning element rarely seen in elemental magic. Based solely on the theoretical explanation in this paper, I'm completely unsure of its authenticity and feasibility. If I hadn't seen the actual combat effects of the spell with my own eyes, I would have thought it was just another fantasy of some confused research path." Dawson nodded and added, "Yes, Kilthuzid used instant casting to release this creation spell in the duel. I can clearly detect the regularity in the magic fluctuations and the structural integrity of the spell." As soon as he finished speaking, Salas, who had been closing his eyes in deep thought, suddenly spoke up. During the entire casting process, there was no disturbance of magical power or misalignment of the spell model structure. This is indeed a brand new, creative spell, and judging by its power and effect, it's a high-level offensive spell. Gallagher, indeed far inferior to his colleagues Salas and Dawson in research, preferred to refer to their suggestions and opinions at times like these. He asked in a deep voice, "It seems he's acquired some extremely valuable magical knowledge from Mr. Turing on the Magic Network forum, perhaps even fragments of truth lost in ancient times." The term fragments of truth is actually an adjective used in the world of spellcasting. Before the founding of the Federation, the ancient wizard kingdoms of the southern continent produced countless legends and geniuses. There were even rumors that powerful wizards at the pinnacle of the spellcasting world, while attempting to transcend the legendary rank and reach the ultimate level of life for spellcasters, the demigod level, accidentally obtained a legacy from an ancient divine race. The magical knowledge contained within this legacy was profound and obscure, and throughout their lives, they could only barely decipher and analyze a small portion of it. They collectively refer to these divine legacies as fragments of truth, claiming that anyone who can decipher the magical knowledge contained within them has the opportunity to touch divinity and truth, achieving true elevation and transcendence in their lives. Dawson frowned and asked, "So? You suspect the forum founders, the ancient, mysterious group led by Mr. Turing, might possess a fragment of truth, and have even successfully deciphered and gained the knowledge contained within?" Gallagher scoffed, self-deprecatingly saying, "Suspect? So what if that's the case? Can we snatch this fragment of truth from them? I'm no match for this suspected demigod. And don't forget, behind him lies Mr. Observer, whose intentions are even more mysterious and difficult to fathom." Dawson recalled Mr. Turing's effortless elimination of the Church's demon slayers, and his uncanny assistance in the attack on the Church's Inquisitor in the Evil Moon mines, and a long-lost pang of fear welled up in his heart. Don't forget, there are also those mysterious energy tools that were developed specifically to target the weaknesses of the demons. Salas suddenly interrupted. Do you think that Mr. Observer handed us the weapon samples just to verify their power? Or was it out of an unwarranted friendliness towards the human race? His body suddenly trembled, and a figure exactly the same as his original body appeared out of thin air at the other end of the study. Cooperation. They are hinting to us that they want to seek cooperation with the Federation, or human spellcasters. A third physical phantom of Salas also instantly appeared by the window, and then said, yes, at least the information they are conveying so far is friendly, isn't it? Gallagher coughed lightly as if he was used to it, and said with a complicated expression, it seems so. Since we can cooperate with them, there is no need to risk breaking the relationship to obtain fragments of truth that may only exist. Besides, no one in the Federation dares to claim that they have the ability to crack the mystery. The 5 people in the study ended their discussion in tacit understanding at the same time. This slightly divergent discussion turned the topic back to the paper that Harvey had just submitted. How should this paper be evaluated? We can't just rely on Sareth to sign it alone like last time, right? Dawson asked awkwardly. Gallagher frowned with a hint of embarrassment and said, once this paper is published in the Gazette, the wave of public opinion it will stir up will probably be no weaker than his previous article. You know, the 2 factions of arcane spellcasting and elemental spellcasting have always been incompatible, but this guy actually combined them perfectly to create and improve such a strange and powerful new spell. Dawson subconsciously touched his red rosacea and rarely chose to agree with Gallagher's opinion. The spellcasters of both factions will inevitably direct all their arguments at him. At that time, the overwhelming debate in opposition will last for a long time. Kel'Thuzad is really a troublemaker with amazing talent and is good at creating controversy. Sareth's real body, sitting at the desk, said quietly, isn't this great? The continent's spellcasting world has remained stagnant for a long time. Don't forget how many years it has been since that no talented spellcaster has been promoted to legend in the Federation and the 7 Wizarding Kingdoms. Both colleagues paused in silence upon hearing this. Sareth was right. In the decades since forming an offensive and defensive alliance with the Church to combat the demonic invasion, no high-ranking spellcaster had successfully ascended to legendary status, either in the 7 Wizarding Kingdoms or within the Federation itself. Human spellcasters' advancement in the path of magic had reached a dire stagnation. If this continued, even without external enemies, suppressing the anti-magic clerical faction within the Church would likely prove difficult. Furthermore, the secular nobles naturally gravitated towards the Church, which was more conducive to their rule over mortals. Gallagher muttered softly and asked tentatively, do you want Kel'Thuzad to enter the candidate list for promotion to legendary spellcaster with this high-rank creative spell? I'm afraid the Supreme Wizard Council of the 7 Kingdoms will not sit idly by and watch us act so recklessly. Dawson snorted coldly and said in a tough tone, so what if we put him on the candidate list? Those reclusive old guys in the Supreme Council have long been behind the times. How can they object here? Salas's body trembled again, and the 3 illusory figures overlapped and solidified in an instant. He stood up abruptly and made a decision. No, letting him enter the candidate list for legendary promotion is the second step we need to take. He raised the paper in his hand, chuckled confidently. First of all, we need to build some momentum for him, such as promoting his new creative spell as a new spellcasting faction, a groundbreaking fusion of magic spells that combines arcane and elements. The Scorching Overlord slowly walked to the window, looking down at the entire layer, which was shrouded by the Skyrealm magic tower, and muttered to himself, what we're doing is a disguised investment and secret support for Mr. Kel'Thuzad. I wonder if Mr. Turing and others, who chose him as their real-world agent, would be satisfied with this. Chapter 206 Fusion Magic, the Beginning of Chaos. Near the end of the workday, Hunter, the Magic Network special agent in the Secretarial Department, received a new research paper from his mentor, Soren Dawson, and was instructed to upload it to the Spellcaster Forum overnight. Compared to Chief Excellencies Salas and Gallagher, Soren Dawson was one of the few legendary spellcasters who showed a bit of concern for knowledge dissemination and education. He had trained and mentored numerous students, and even Hunter, who had the privilege of attending a few of his open theoretical lectures, could claim to be his nominal students. Returning to his sealed room on the middle floor of the Sky Domain, The other two secretarial colleagues had already checked out. Hunter sighed helplessly and sat back at his magic computer to begin typing. Huh? This paper actually deals with research on non-basic elements and force field magic. Hunter couldn't help but pause his typing and picked up the paper again to begin reading carefully. But even a quick glance at it made him feel breathless, and his calm expression began to falter. Most of the theoretical exposition is presented within the existing framework of magic. How did it all come together? I'm having trouble understanding it. He closed the document again and carefully examined the title of the paper on the cover, Research on Non-Basic Elemental Spellcasting and the Application of Lightning Electric Fields in Spellcasting. This is too far-fetched. They've combined elemental magic with arcane magic to create a completely new fusion technique. And it's not just a theoretical conjecture, they've actually successfully constructed a model for the technique and obtained feedback data from practical applications. Hunter couldn't help but stand up, pacing anxiously around the room. After calming down for a moment, he couldn't help but open the paper again. The title page still listed the paper's evaluation at the very beginning, but for the first time, it lacked the initial review stamp of the academic research department, nor the formalities of the paper review committee. Instead, it was co-signed by the 3 chief mages of the Union. The Spellcaster Forum's Magic Encyclopedia section had finally launched online on the promised date, amidst much anticipation. However, because most forum members are keen on active communication and frequent use of the trading function, most people do not have a lot of forum points. Many even deplete their points due to their addiction to the unique card game Tower of Magic. The Magic Encyclopedia's operating model encourages forum members to use their points to access different levels of information. The higher the level, the more information they can access. Simply accessing information requires a certain amount of points, and if you want to directly access the information, you must pay for the points in exchange for copying and downloading the required information. Otherwise, you will only see a short summary of less than 1 page. This led to a somewhat awkward situation. Everyone enthusiastically entered the Magic Encyclopedia's functional sections, only to find, regretfully, that their meager points were completely insufficient to redeem the desired literature. They could only gaze helplessly at this illusory treasure trove of knowledge that stood on the Magic Network forum. Fortunately, during the initial preparations for the Magic Encyclopedia, Harvey had made an additional request of the Federation. All past Federation bulletins must be uploaded to the forum, and all new content for subsequent monthly publications must also be published in advance. This served as a welfare benefit for forum members, allowing them to read the latest Federation bulletin in advance and freely access past issues. After all, many forum members were independent spellcasters in remote areas and secular kingdoms. It was often difficult for them to obtain cutting-edge knowledge and new information at the earliest opportunity. A physical Federation bulletin, circulated among these small circles, could only be circulated by mutual circulation, and most of these copies were long out of date. Therefore, most members with insufficient points prioritized browsing the encyclopedia's only free content, looking for past issues of the bulletin they missed or had no access to. Just as the clock struck 10 o'clock in the evening, a brand new bulletin appeared on the Magic Encyclopedia. This was the latest issue, due out in 2 days, and it immediately caught the attention of many active members, who clicked in to read. A study of non-basic elemental spellcasting and the application of lightning fields in spellcasting, author, Kilthuzid. He actually compiled his original spell into a research paper and published it in the Union Bulletin. The dwarf, codenamed Frost Giant, exclaimed with wide eyes and astonishment. At the same time, more forum members also saw the article, and the Spellcaster forum server was buzzing with a flurry of member codes, a silent frenzy. While studying the basic elements, I observed a peculiar phenomenon. No matter it is the power of thunder and lightning derived from the wind element, or the power of ice contained in the water element, they all belong to the category of elemental magic in essence. But why would gravitational fluctuations be born in the earth element? This is clearly based on the scope of arcane magic. In the necromancy faction, when releasing curse spells, it is necessary to guide death energy and mental power at the same time. As we all know, mental power is the carrier of astrological magic. Therefore, I boldly guess that no matter it is elements, arcane energy, death energy or mental power, the essence is actually the pure magic energy that is everywhere in the magic network, which manifests in different forms of energy fluctuations. There is actually no difference in their cores. It's just a different manifestation of force. I used thunder and lightning, gravity, and mental power to form a unique structure that interacts with each other and repels each other, and realize the model construction of this original spell in the magic pattern, allowing them to pull and tug at each other and generate friction, and finally burst out powerful attack energy. As usual, the evaluation results of the thesis are published on the title page. This paper uses bold and imaginative conjectures, rigorous experiments and actual application data to confirm the feasibility of the fusion of elemental magic and arcane magic. The theoretical explanation is logically clear and the experimental model structure is rigorous. Everyone, in the theoretical knowledge we have been learning, how are the four basic elements of wind, fire, earth and water transformed from pure magic energy in the magic network into elemental structures? If the magic spells of all different factions in the world are essentially just different forms of magic network energy, does that mean that the barriers of the magic factions need to be completely broken down? Our evaluation result is, this is not just an original fusion magic spell, but a groundbreaking and subversive fusion magic energy application technology. It is one of the cornerstones of new magic theory, the beginning of chaos and fusion. Paper reviewers, Kimo Salas, Soren Dawson, Wes Gallagher. Chapter 207 Netizens? Cheating Gunman. Harvey, a shadowy figure condensed from his mental power, hovered within the magic network. Beside him, with eyes closed, was the Son of Flame, entering the magic pattern to inscribe a spell matrix. Just 2 days after the paper was published in the Union's bulletin, the impatient Archmage began sending Harvey a steady stream of messages, ranging from simple greetings to random chats about his experiences. Their overt and covert purpose was to urge Harvey to teach him his original technique as soon as possible. However, Harvey's creation essentially utilized a mysterious starry sky that suddenly appeared within the mutated mental anchor. Through the gravitational pull between the star and the anchor, he unleashed a unique, fused electromagnetic magic. Mr. Son of Flame was clearly a legitimate elemental mage, and could not possibly possess the immense mental power and mutated mental anchor unique to a time traveler like Harvey. Even the magic pattern was a vast metal furnace. The magic energy he concentrated through meditation consisted entirely of fire elemental magic transformed through the magic patterns, practically devoid of a single drop of the pure magic energy of the magic network. Although he had spent most of his life as a battle mage, and had suddenly realized the importance of switching majors to research magic, he hadn't made any significant contributions to magical research. Aside from publishing a few papers on fire magic, his only advantage was that no one dared to challenge him in front of his face, calling him a frail academic slouch. When faced with academic disputes, he could use his formidable fighting prowess to physically convince others. How to complete the modeling and magic pattern engraving of this fusion technique presented a real challenge for Harvey. Firstly, he lacked mental strength, and secondly, he needed to convert his elemental magic into pure magic energy. After consulting with Mr. Heart Demon, a native of the magic net, Harvey discovered a seemingly feasible solution, using a secret ritual inherited from ancient times to temporarily reverse the elemental magic within Mr. Flame Sun's body. Although the entire process would only last less than 3/4 of an hour, it should be enough for him to complete the construction of this relatively simple spell model. As for the lack of mental power, he could only resort to spending money. Whether it was the ancient texts in the Magic Encyclopedia or the family traditions of the hybrid Elfegno, there were magical potions that could significantly enhance the caster's mental power, and there were more than one formula to choose from. Harvey and the Flame Sun discussed the formula with the fewest side effects, and the Flame Sun would be responsible for collecting the ingredients himself. No, damn it. I'm failing at the same point. Damn it, why do I keep making mistakes here? The Flame Sun's mental projection suddenly opened its eyes, gnashing its teeth, as if ready to slap itself at any moment. Harvey silently checked his watch and said calmly, "A quarter of an hour has passed, Mr. Flame Sun. We have at most 3 more attempts at trial and error. Otherwise, we'll have to wait for another full moon suitable for consciousness, and waste another dose of mental potion." Flame Sun's already dark face suddenly flushed even more. Although he had a short temper, he was usually quite gentle with Harvey. Besides, Harvey was his temporary one-on-one magic tutor, so naturally he wouldn't vent his anger on him for no reason. "I understand. I wonder how much hardship you endured and how many precious magical materials you wasted when you created this spell. It seems you, Mr. Kilthuzid, have quite a fortune," he quipped casually, taking the opportunity to calm his impatience. After all, the most important thing about constructing a spell model is maintaining a stable, focused, An absolutely rational mental state. It wasn't a pain in the ass, and I didn't spend a single magical material. It was just created naturally and by accident. Harvey complained silently, but wisely chose not to say it out loud, not wanting to further undermine the netizens' confidence and morale. When connecting with your mental energy, you must pay attention to the energy conversion form and the frequency of the vibrations contained therein. Only when you achieve a certain absolutely precise vibration frequency will the model's base construction be stable, Harvey reminded him tirelessly. I followed your instructions exactly, but that thing is too difficult to capture. It clings to the tentacles of my mental energy, like strings thinner than a hair. If I pluck them to vibrate, if I plucking them too hard, they'll break. If I plucking them too softly, they won't budge at all. The son of fire grumbled quietly, but he knew the problem lay with him. He could only try again and again with intense concentration. There was no other solution. Harvey sighed silently and waved his hand to stop wasting time and try again, lest he waste the priceless high-level magic potion. As the son of flame entered meditation again, constructing his spell model, Harvey finally couldn't resist. He detached a thin mental tentacle from his own mental projection, quietly swiped toward the opponent's magic pattern, and gently probed inside. This action was inherently dangerous. To protect themselves, most high-level spellcasters use their mental power to guide their own magic patterns, constructing a defensive mechanism to counter intrusion. This was often their last resort, designed to protect against specialized enemies like the Church's demon slayers, who could transcend space and planes and target the magic patterns that were vital to the spellcaster's lifeline. Some spellcasters with violent personalities, fearing the possibility of their own magic patterns being invaded, potentially leading to the theft of their thoughts or even the more gruesome torture of soul-searching, would choose to trigger their magic patterns to self-destruct when faced with an attack, wiping out both themselves and the enemy in the other dimension. Therefore, Harvey conducted this stealthy operation with extreme caution, striving to avoid provoking a sudden stress response in the Son of Flame. It feels like secretly correcting a poor student's botched exam, trying to mimic their handwriting so they'll think they passed on their own merit. Being a cheater is so hard. Harvey manipulated the thread of mental power, solidifying it into an imperceptible filament. He sought the sudden pause in the other person's magic pattern and dove into it. Within the Son of Fire's mental anchor, a massive metal furnace stood in an endless ethereal space. The relentless roar of anvil seemed to echo faintly in his ears. Every few seconds, the exploding furnace would violently erupt with streams of blazing flames, causing the entire mental space to tremble violently. This immense and scorching mental power made Harvey feel as if he were in a flaming mountain. He felt dizzy and thirsty, and the thin thread of mental power was almost severed by the scorching wind that swept through the space. Harvey spotted the Son of Fire hovering above the furnace, his feet resting on a projection of a strange ritual array. He continuously absorbed the pure magical energy transformed from the furnace, carefully guiding an illusory planet above him as it slowly orbited the furnace. Using Professor Harvey's method, he simulated the pull between the planet and his mental anchor, accurately capturing the energy fluctuations needed to construct the array model. A subtle gravitational wave suddenly emerged from his mental connection tendrils. Harvey instantly detected its frequency and slowly manipulated his mental power towards it. The Son of Fire also detected the gravitational wave, quickly condensing a new mental tentacle from his projection and carefully extending it along the path it had emerged. A tentative flick caused the fragile gravitational wave to snap, instantly detaching from the attached mental tentacle and gradually dissipating into the space. Seizing the opportunity, Harvey's mental power suddenly shot out, catching the broken wave line and instantly reuniting it, forming a new gravitational wave. The Son of Fire's spiritual power also sensed the sudden change, and he, too, not wanting to miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, plucked the suddenly restored cord of gravity again. An invisible ripple suddenly rippled through the entire spiritual space, and the stars overhead shone brilliantly. A beam of radioactive light suddenly swept through the illusory space, and the overwhelming magical power immediately squeezed Harvey out. Ho ha ho ha. I did it. I did it. Chapter 208 Rescue Plan. Located on a fertile peninsula along the southern coast, the capital of the Pharos Principality, known as the Land of 1,000 Sails, Erisburg stands a luxurious, classical building with a sign reading Moon and Wine Club over its gate. This private club requires registered membership and referrals. A woman wearing a simple long dress and a deep black veil entered, carrying a sleek small suitcase. Ms. Melissa, Mr. Jin has arrived early. Please allow me to take you there." A waiter in a tuxedo immediately greeted the newly arrived guest, gracefully guiding him to the second-floor lounge. As soon as the door of the lounge closed, the black-haired man sitting on the sofa immediately stood up impatiently. "Melissa. Hey, you're finally here." He subconsciously reached out and turned the sea blue ring on his ring finger, and asked in a low voice, "Did you bring all the materials for the ceremony?" The woman called Melissa rolled her eyes helplessly, handed over the small suitcase in her hand, and complained, "These materials can be transferred safely and quickly through the forum's magic network teleportation array, but you insisted on letting me carry them with me. I was so nervous all the way." Mr. Jin, who had a gaunt face and a gentle expression, heard this and gave an embarrassed smile. He muttered to himself, "You also know that the forum occasionally has connection fluctuations. The previous 2 times, some members' precious materials that were in the process of being transferred were damaged or lost. We can't afford such consequences. It's safest to carry them with me." He carefully took the suitcase, placing it firmly on the coffee table. With a click, he unlocked the lock, revealing its contents: an empty, oval shell resembling a broken eggshell, immersed deep in the liquid of a crystal bottle. It was the mutated egg case of a blackfin salamander, a rare magical creature found only on the islands of the southern seas. The remnant left after the juvenile transforms into an adult, its rich and highly concentrated magical substances and a rare ingredient required for ancient rituals. "Now that we have all the necessary materials, when do we set out to meet up with Benoit?" Mr. Jin closed the suitcase again and chuckled, "We can set off at any time. Benoit's alchemy laboratory is just on the outskirts of Erisburg. It's a fertile country estate he obtained after splitting from his family. It only takes half a day to get there by carriage." Melissa was silent for a moment, and suddenly asked, "Jin, do you really think that the research inspiration obtained from Mr. Kilthuzad's thesis can support us to complete this ancient ritual?" Melissa Penna, whose foreign code name is Astrologer, and Jin Gavin, whose foreign code name is Eye of Illusion, have been good friends for more than 10 years. They are also classmates and close friends from the Orland Royal Magic Academy. At the Orland Royal School of Magic, they had once studied in the arcane spellcasting faction and became known as the Crown Twins. Before the age of 25, they had successfully ascended to mid-level spellcasters, earning them the opportunity to further their studies at the continent's most prestigious magic academy, the Alair Academy. After successfully graduating from Alair, they both ascended to high-level ranks within a short 10 years, becoming a rapidly rising force in the arcane spellcasting faction of the 7 Wizarding Kingdoms. Kim Gavin sighed and said in a low voice, "Melissa, you know I have no other choice. This ancient ritual is my last lifeline. Without your and Benoit's continuous help, I wouldn't even be able to gather the materials for the ritual, let alone gain the research inspiration to complete the magic circle from the forum." He couldn't help but quickly turn the ring on his finger. He walked to the window and muttered hurriedly, "The teacher has been trapped in that strange state for a full 6 years. If I can't find a way to rescue him, I'm afraid." Melissa couldn't help but comfort her, "We can completely seek help from those legendary masters through the forum, or even seek help from the mysterious Mr. Turing. There's no need to risk it alone." Kim Gavin turned his head with horror and shouted in a low voice, "Absolutely not. If the members of the Federation in the forum knew about the teacher's affairs, I'm afraid even the teacher's family and relatives, as well as those of us involved in this matter, would be held accountable. As for seeking help from Mr. Turing, you should know that we can't afford the price he requires." His tone shifted, and he pleaded gently, "Melissa, please help me just this last time. If you still fail, let's find a way to finally free our teacher." Outside of Erisburg, a fertile manor nestled on a plain at the foot of a mountain. As the 2 arcane spellcasters disembarked from their carriage, a middle-aged man who had been guarding the manor gate hurried over to greet them. His expression was filled with anxiety. "You're finally here. I was so worried I couldn't sleep well these past few days." This was their close friend and classmate from the Royal Academy of Magic, Benoit Kevin, a student at the alchemy school and a high-ranking alchemist known on the spellcaster forum as Mithril Unicorn. Jin was stunned and asked anxiously, "Is there something wrong with the teacher?" Benoit scratched his sparse hair irritably and said angrily, "Since last week, even the largest dose of sleeping potion can't make him fall into peaceful sleep, and since last night, I found that his body began to show signs of flesh and blood disintegration. I added another dose of potion to promote the repair of flesh and blood, but the effect was not good." Melissa analyzed calmly, "To forcibly contain such a huge and mixed magical power, Even a battle mage who has undergone a flesh and blood strengthening ritual can't hold on for too long. If the teacher hadn't been in the process of performing a transfiguration spell and was strangely solidified in a transformed state, he would have been able to resist the manic energy in his body in the form of an ancient magical beast. I'm afraid he would have done it 6 years ago. The three of them walked into the manor, discussing quickly in low voices, and soon arrived at the alchemy laboratory set up by Benoit in the basement of the manor. Let's prepare all the necessary materials for the ritual here first. Late at night, we'll head to the cave in the mountains where our teacher hides to complete the transformation ritual. Kim Gavin turned to his friend and suddenly spoke. Benoit, please bring your family's inherited alchemical weapon. The Judas magic-breaking crossbow. Melissa and I have already agreed that if the ritual fails, we will help our teacher achieve true liberation. He then materialized a stack of parchment scrolls from his storage ring and waved them around. Now, you need to listen carefully to what I have to say. This research paper, originating from Mr. Kilthuzid, confirms the feasibility of merging elemental and arcane magic. Therefore, extracting and purifying this mixed chaos magic, transforming it back into independent magical veins, must also be possible. Chapter 209 Crisis and Truth. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, the moonlight filtered through the sparse treetops onto the rugged mountain path. Benoit Kevin's family owned a fertile estate, encompassing the dense forest behind it. Tenants on the estate planted numerous tea trees, a specialty of the Duchy of Pharos, on the hillside, earning the Kevin family considerable profits from the tea trade. 6 years ago, after secretly placing the teacher here, I had my trusted aides and servants spread rumors in nearby towns and villages that a landslide caused by heavy rain had resulted in the deaths of tea pickers. They also claimed that because the family had forbidden church members from operating within the estate, the souls of the unjustly deceased could not receive mass, leading to the legend that the mountain was haunted at night. Benoit, breathlessly leading the two students further into the mountains, recounted his secretive measures with a touch of pride. Although the Duchy of Pharos was a secular kingdom, the church's influence was not prominent, firmly dominated by the local union's spellcasters. Unlike the other two men, Melissa didn't need to carry ritual materials on her back, so she walked a little more easily. No matter how foolish and timid ordinary people are, can they be scared away from approaching this tea mountain for several years just based on a fabricated rumor of a haunted place? Jin put down the backpack in his hand, stopped to take a breath, and explained with a smile, rumors alone are of course not enough. I also purchased a lot of shadowbat vocal cords from secret societies of spellcasters from all over the place, and asked Benoit to create alchemical traps that can emit ghostly screams and illusory ghosts. We placed them in various strategic locations at the foot of the mountain to stop hunters and herbalists who venture up the mountain. Melissa rolled her eyes speechlessly and muttered softly, I still feel it's unsafe. Even if we don't seek help from the legendary lords in the forum, we should contact Mr. Kilthuzid in advance and exchange it with him for a practical method of reversing magic energy. Instead of, Benoit glanced at Jin's expression and quickly smoothed things over, saying, well, there's no time for last-minute changes to the plan at this point. All the ritual materials are ready. Let's take it one step at a time. After 2 or 3 hours, the three finally arrived at a hidden cave halfway up the mountainside near midnight. The cave was indeed a natural cave formed by a landslide, but since the entire forest didn't produce any minerals, it was quickly forgotten and abandoned, making it a perfect place for them to hide and perform their secret rituals. Benoit waved his hands, summoning a mage's hand to brush aside the dense vines obscuring the cave entrance. The three of them, holding up the activated illuminating magic stone, ducked down and entered. After walking a few hundred meters through the winding mountain corridor, the interior gradually opened up, revealing a natural cave the size of a castle. From the darkness beyond the reach of the magic stone's illumination, a strange, rhythmic panting sound could be heard, like the chewing and swallowing of some unknown, terrifying beast hidden in the shadows. Melissa took the magic stones from the other two and, with a swift incantation, lifted up the 3 stones. They spun rapidly, emitting a burst of intense light. With a single toss, she threw the 3 combined magic stones toward the cave ceiling, illuminating the entire cavern with a lingering, panoramic view. Arcane Radiance, a common low-level spell used by arcane spellcasters, could be cast using only the illumination magic stone as a component. The levitation and illumination could last for hours. A dozen steps in front of them, crouching on the ground, was a massive beast as large as a 4-wheeled carriage. Its body was pitch black, covered in fine, dark red lines. Its legs were unusually thin and twisted, standing out from its massive bulk, as if they had been hastily stitched together. The most terrifying thing was that above its neck, a human head with untidy hair lay, face down, pressed against the ground, its features indistinct. The strange, incessant wheezing came from this horrific half-human, half-beast creature. The dark red lines on its body flickered in the light as the rhythm of its breathing shifted. Jin's face was filled with excitement. He took 2 steps forward, his voice trembling. "Teacher Duncan." "Teacher." The terrifying beast's body trembled slightly, and its head, pressed against the ground, struggled to rise, its bony neck propelling it upward. A dark, gray, aged face revealed itself before the 3 of them. Its unusually bulging eyes were dim and cloudy. It opened its dry, cracked lips, but only a hoarse sound came out. Melissa suddenly covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes reddened. How could Teacher Duncan become like this? Teacher Duncan is a high-level arcane mage who is more powerful than us. 6 years ago, in the battle with the high-level priest of the church, the teacher rashly used the ancient transformation that had not yet been fully decomposed into form, wanting to defeat the enemy in the form of an ancient dragon. The result, Jin murmured in a low voice. Why? In that battle, the teacher obviously won with great difficulty. Wasn't it confirmed by the church that the lamp of the soul of that high-level priest had been extinguished, and he was completely declared dead? Jin chuckled self-deprecatingly, his voice trembling. He did win. The magical dragon that the teacher conjured up devoured the priest alive. When he wanted to end the spell and restore his form, he became like this now. Okay, we will discuss the specific circumstances of that incident later. The most important thing now is to complete the ritual as soon as possible and rescue the teacher from his current state, Benoit urged as he took out the ritual materials from his backpack. The 3 of them immediately regained their composure and began to work on their pre-assigned tasks. Jin was in charge of preparing the ritual potion using secret techniques and drawing the patterns for the ritual circle, while Benoit took out the previously prepared ritual materials one by one and placed them in their designated locations within the circle. Duncan, lying in the center of the unfinished circle, raised his withered, aged head again and, with a wail, vomited a large mass of dark red, clotted blood. As soon as the blood fell to the ground, it twisted and squirmed as if alive, slithering back into the dark red cracks and lines on his body. This is a case of flesh disintegration, but with a flesh-repairing potion I injected ahead of time, it can hold out for a while. Benoit pulled a rusty brass brazier from his backpack and placed it in the southwest corner of the circle. He tossed in the mutated egg case of the blackfin salamander Melissa had brought along with other equally rare magical materials. He rubbed his fingers together, and a flame erupted, quickly igniting the brazier. At the same time, Jin had just finished drawing the final portion of the magic circle pattern. He stood up and began to chant the ancient ritual incantation. The air suddenly froze for a second, then an invisible whirlwind began to blow, and the surrounding darkness seemed to wriggle with life. The ritual circle shone with a dull dark red light, and the lines of the drawn pattern seemed to slowly flow like semi-coagulated blood, finally converging beneath Duncan, who lay crouched in the center of the circle. Maintaining his strangely deformed state, Duncan's body trembled violently. He struggled to raise his head again, but his grayish-black face suddenly twisted, and a strange smile curled at the corners of his mouth. Snap! His 2 dim yellow eyeballs suddenly exploded and fell to the ground. From the bloody eye sockets, 2 twisted dark red tentacles suddenly emerged and swept towards Jin, who was closest to him. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210 Online Help from Late at Night. A crystalline, illusory barrier instantly emerged around Jin's body. 2 twisted tentacles slammed into it, then swiftly bounced back to the center of the circle. This was the 5th level defensive spell of the arcane caster, Mirror Veil. What's going on? Why didn't the ritual have any effect at all, and it even triggered the accelerated transformation of Teacher Duncan's body? Benoit grumbled, shocked and furious. Jin, didn't you say that according to Mr. Kilthuzid's research, the completed array of this ancient ritual can reanalyze and transform the chaotic energy within the teacher's body? Jin, who had just escaped danger by completely reflexively casting the spell, now retreated several steps in a cold sweat, leaving the range of the circle. I don't know either. According to the description in the ancient ritual atlas, All the steps we took and all the materials we used were fine. He slapped his head suddenly, his face filled with sudden realization and horror. I know. The high-level priest who was devoured by the teacher after he transformed into a dragon. Because he is a blood relative of the teacher, so after being devoured, the ancient blood curse was triggered. It turns out that the teacher's body changes were caused by this. Melissa was shocked and angry, and asked in a trembling voice, "Why did you say it now? Is this why you have been preventing me from asking for help publicly on the forum?" There is actually a high-level priest of the church and teacher Duncan's family. Benoit obviously knew some inside truth, and sighed softly. Teacher Duncan comes from a prominent ancient wizard family. His family has been passed down since the ancient magic empire. He is a true descendant of the ancient wizard bloodline. If this kind of thing were to be made public, it turns out that the cause of the blood curse recorded in the ancient ritual atlas is the scene we see before us. The physical changes that will occur after devouring the blood of the same clan. The secrets and unknowns contained in the blood of ancient wizards are really too terrifying. While speaking, Duncan, who is in a strange state, emerged more dark red twisted tentacles from his ears, nose and mouth, dancing continuously like strange snakes, but seemed to be restricted by the magic circle. For a while, they could not penetrate the range covered by the magic circle and attack the three people standing outside. Melissa hesitated for a moment, gritted her teeth and asked Benoit and Jin, "What should we do? Should we use the Judith demon-breaking crossbow?" "Jin, make a decision quickly." Benoit immediately took out a small golden crossbow from the stored ring. He clenched his hands but did not dare to aim it at Duncan in the magic circle. With red eyes, he looked at his best friend and said in a trembling voice, "Jin." Jin's body shook slightly, but he regained his determination. No. Wait a little longer, let's wait and see what changes will happen. Now the magic circle can still trap these things that have mutated from the teacher's body. He also turned the stored ring on his finger, but unexpectedly took out a small brass typewriter and threw it into Melissa's hand. "Quick! Melissa, log into the Spellcaster forum and ask for help from any legendary lord who is still online in the forum." Melissa instinctively took the magic brain device, extracted the charging magic stone, and activated the login. Then, pale, she turned to look at the two of them, stunned. It's midnight now, and no one's online on the forum. I only see that Mr. Neumann's code is still lit. Should I send him a message for help? Harvey sat in the castle's study, surfing the magic encyclopedia intensively since dinner until late at night, almost missing the perfect opportunity for midnight meditation. The ancient magic tomes and magical historical documents compiled and uploaded by the Federation in the Magic Encyclopedia, while not of much help to his current research and experiments, could greatly broaden his horizons and knowledge. Among them were some theoretical research and experimental ideas that were often discarded by orthodox spellcasters, but which he found extremely interesting and creative. He was about to log out of the forum and go offline for guided meditation when he suddenly noticed a member's code flashing rapidly on the server, and a single message was sent to him at a rapid speed. The message was directed to his unpopular pseudonym, Observer Neumann. It's this inactive astrologer. Why is he suddenly contacting the forum administrator? Harvey clicked on the one-way message, filled with questions, only to find it contained a remarkably brief line. "Astrologer, dear observer, forum members astrologer, Eye of Illusion, and Mithril Unicorn urgently request assistance. We are in an extremely dangerous situation and desperately seek your response." A message for help? A forum member had actually sent him an urgent request. Harvey sat up straight and quickly typed, "Observer Neumann, I'm here. What's going on?" While replying to astrologer, he separated his mental power and sank into the magic network space, quickly rushing to the location sent by this message. "Astrologer, we are sorry to bother you. We encountered an emergency during an ancient ritual. This ritual is to save a high-level spellcaster who is in an abnormal state. He is the academy mentor of the three of us." When Harvey received all the information about the incident from the other party, he also shuttled through the magic network and directly arrived at the target location located by the members. 3 magic patterns flashing with light were suspended in the magic network space, surrounding a strange shape. It seemed that 2 magic patterns were twisted and entangled together. A strange creation. No. These are not 2 magic patterns. This is a magic pattern and the soul projection of a church priest. They are strangely intertwined together to form a twisted substance that combines divine energy and magic. Harvey approached the dim substance slowly with curiosity and surprise, and found that a large number of fine earthworm-like vascular tentacles grew from their fusion joints, connecting with each other and forming a complete set of energy circulation pathways in an unusually harmonious manner. The divine energy of the glorious religion actually achieved circulation and balance with the magic power of the spellcaster in such a strange way. Someone was secretly conducting an experiment to blend divine arts with magic, and then some unknown accident happened, resulting in this thing. I'm afraid that in the real world, the condition of the spellcaster who conducted the experiment is worrying. He immediately channeled his mental energy to connect directly to the spellcaster form and sent a message to the astrologer, Observer Neumann. I saw it, a creation that twisted the taboo. You, and your teacher, are conducting forbidden experiments that seriously violate the spellcaster treaty. Melissa looked up with horror at Benoit and King, who were desperately trying to infuse magic power into the ritual array to maintain the seal instability. She said in a trembling voice, that Mr. Observer actually responded to me. But he actually told me that he saw everything we are doing now. Are we not going to get into big trouble? While working hard to pour his own magic power into the ritual array, King took out the arcane magic stone to replenish the lost energy. Beads of sweat gradually appeared on his forehead. Without turning his head, he responded to Melissa. What else? As far as I know, Mr. Turing and Mr. Neumann are both suspected to be ancient demigod-level beings. There is no doubt that since his honorific name is Observer, he must be able to immediately know our current situation. Benoit's face paled as he pulled magical materials from his pocket and threw them into the brass brazier, keeping the core energy of the ritual array energized. He anxiously urged Melissa, hurry, seek the help of Mr. Observer. Pray for his help in extracting and transforming the chaotic magic within Teacher Duncan. We will do our utmost to satisfy him in the future, regardless of the price he pays. Chapter 211 Cyber Surgery. Even as the astrologer continued to send messages detailing the crisis and requesting specific assistance, Harvey had already begun tentatively contacting the twisted fusion pattern within the magic network, using his concentrated mental energy. The moment Harvey's mental tentacles touched the intertwined blood-colored buds, like ice and snow meeting a red-hot iron, they vanished and shrank back into their respective fragmented magic patterns. Harvey was delighted. It seemed that by completely eliminating these blood-colored buds, he could completely separate the two incomplete magic patterns. The operation would be as easy as a gardener using scissors to trim a landscape plant. However, the problem was that neither the spellcaster nor the church priest could survive and maintain normal human form in reality, solely relying on the incomplete magic patterns and soul projections. The magic patterns and soul projections were reflections of the spellcaster's own mental energy, formed within the magic network space. If even the soul and mind were incomplete, the physical body naturally could not rest easy. This, or rather, these two, a high-level spellcaster and a church priest entangled and fused together, are likely on the verge of physical collapse, and their minds are struggling to maintain normal function. If Harvey had stumbled upon a stranger in such a bizarre and pitiful state while wandering the magical web, he'd likely have uttered, "There's no cure, no hope, just wait for death." But after all, they were forum members seeking help, and not to mention the price they were willing to pay, Harvey had to try to help simply to maintain his powerful and mysterious online image. Since the owner of the shattered soul is a priest of the Church of Light, Harvey naturally didn't bother to deal with him. Since there was no hope, he could use the remaining half of his projection to repair the remaining fragments of the spellcaster's magic pattern. Observer Neumann, I can attempt to strip your teacher of the chaotic magic, but there's no guarantee he can return to his original state. If I fail, I will instantly erase this twisted creation. Is that acceptable to you? Melissa relayed Harvey's message to his two close friends, who were maintaining the circle through the spell. Jin and Benoit exchanged a glance and gritted their teeth. Promise, Mr. Observer. We're at our wits' end. Mr. Neumann's intervention increases the chances of our teacher's rescue 100-fold compared to this near-failed ritual. With their approval, Harvey manipulated his mental tentacles to rapidly dissolve and sever the distorted flesh from the magic patterns and soul, quickly clearing the intertwined fragments of the two soul projections. At this point, if he only directed his mental power to strike the rift connecting them, he could instantly sever the two projected emblems, but the consequence would be the immediate death of the caster in reality. So, Harvey boldly employed a pre-prepared strategy. Manipulating his own magic patterns, he pounced directly upon them, swiftly engulfing them within his mutated mental anchor. Standing on the familiar gray-black beach within the spirit anchor, Harvey gazed upon the creatures before him, who resembled deformed conjoined twins, and a sudden chill washed over him. It was so bizarre, so disgusting, they could no longer be called human. While each still possessed 2 arms and 2 legs, their heads and faces were strangely fused together, appearing grotesquely swollen and deformed, their thin necks seemingly teetering on the brink of collapse. Their limbs were so twisted and emaciated that they could barely stand upright, forcing them to crawl and wriggle on the ground. It seems there's a profound mutual incompatibility between magic and divine arts. No wonder no one has successfully combined the two for thousands of years. Of course, this is a taboo within taboos, forbidden by both factions. The psychic energy emanating from the conjoined twins allowed Harvey to clearly distinguish their identities. The noticeably weaker half must be the church priest, seemingly forced into this miserable state. Perhaps they were captured to participate in the caster's mad experiments, or perhaps they were defeated in a fight, only to use secret magic to strike back before their death, praying for a shared destruction with the caster. Harvey pondered the situation as he slowly approached the deformed conjoined twins. Strange, still unidentified, bloody holes on their chests and abdomens suddenly materialized, sending a faint whiff of longing and extreme hunger. The largest of the abdominal holes reacted swiftly as Harvey approached the deformed limb belonging to the church priest, snapping open and biting fiercely. More holes, large and small, instantly appeared on Harvey's body, launching into a bloody and horrific feast. Soon, the priest's limb was largely devoured, leaving only the pitiful chest, waist, and abdomen, along with 1 arm and 1 leg, hanging precariously next to the caster's body. Even the head had been gnawed away by Harvey's manifested holes. The body of the spellcaster, still apparently retaining a shimmer of consciousness, erupted in a sharp roar. Its cloudy, yellow eyes betrayed a look of extreme fear as it squirmed repeatedly, attempting to escape. Harvey immediately ceased its devouring and stood a distance to observe. As he had anticipated, after disrupting the conjoined twins' balance, the stronger and more robust spellcaster began rapidly absorbing the missing priest's body, quickly repairing the deformities and distortions of its own limbs. Harvey immediately summoned a vast mental force, sweeping the spellcaster's projection away from the mental anchor and back into the magic network. The magic pattern, once shattered and fused, was no longer dim and incomplete as it had been initially. Instead, it began to surge with waves of magical energy, slowly rotating and repairing itself. As expected of a high-level spellcaster, even in such a dire situation, he still managed to save himself. Of course, this also depended on Harvey adding a chip of his own to the spellcaster's life in this evenly matched, devouring battle, a chip weighing 800 kilograms. In the real world, Melissa and the other 2 suddenly noticed that Teacher Duncan, crouching in the center of the ritual circle, had strangely twisted his body. Then, the skin and skin, which had once belonged to his transformed sub-dragon form, rapidly cracked and shattered into ash, revealing what, though pale and bloodless, was clearly human skin. From its massive body, streams of black pus, emitting a strong, rancid stench, flowed across the ground along the lines of the ritual circle. Soon, the twisted monster, its shape frozen and its transformation, disintegrated completely, leaving only a pale, naked elderly man lying in the center of the circle, eyes closed, deep in sleep. Benoit immediately took off his wizard robe, rushed forward and covered the teacher with it, lowered his head to observe his condition, turned around and smiled bitterly. The limbs are severely twisted and atrophied. I'm afraid the teacher's hands and feet can't be saved. Jin and Melissa also came over and knelt on one knee, showing a relieved expression. It doesn't matter, as long as the teacher can survive. This is completely acceptable. Benoit, you will be responsible for preparing the potion in the future, so that the teacher can wake up and recover as soon as possible. I heard that Tanmi will have alchemical prosthetic limb transplant surgery. I wonder if you have any channels or connections. Benoit immediately interrupted Jin's beautiful fantasy. Don't count on Tanmi, that's simply an immature technology. All those who have undergone transplant surgery have developed severe limb rejection reactions. The teacher can't stand such torture and tossing now. Jin and others were discussing fiercely, and suddenly they felt a vast and majestic mental power pouring in from their respective magic patterns, and a pair of illusory and layered voices resounded in their minds almost at the same time. It seems that the rescue plan was successful. Haha, everyone, don't forget to pay the price you deserve. Good night. The 3 of them sat on the ground with pale faces and looked at each other. No one spoke for a while. Chapter 212, Observer's Protection. On the outskirts of Erisburg, in the Kevin family's estate, Melissa and Kim sat in a luxuriously decorated study, each dazed, cups of hot tea in hand. Benoit walked in, hands in his pockets, snapping them both back to reality. They asked simultaneously, "How is the teacher now? Has he woken up?" Benoit, a high-level alchemist and an excellent potion master, rolled his eyes and said speechlessly, "How could it be so fast? It's only been 2 days. This is a trauma on the soul level. If it weren't for Mr. Neumann's terrifying methods, even if we used the ritual to release the teacher from his transformed state, he would most likely become an ordinary, frail old man paralyzed in bed with dementia, and he wouldn't have many years to live." Kim quickly asked, "What about now? With Mr. Observer's help, the teacher can at least retain his abilities as a spellcaster, right?" Melissa sighed softly. "With his limbs crippled, what good is it to retain his status as a spellcaster? This level of physical damage will affect his mental strength, and I'm afraid the teacher will drop in rank." Benoit waved his hands and tried to liven up the atmosphere. "No matter what, the teacher's life is at least saved. I have arranged for the workshop to customize a wheelchair for him. When he wakes up in a while, we can push him out for a walk immediately." Jin coughed and changed the subject with some worry. "Then what should we do next? The price from the Observer, Mr. Neumann? How can we afford it?" I have privately asked close forum members, some of whom were invited to join when the forum was first established. According to them, Mr. Turing's requirement for the price is to ensure equal exchange. Mr. Neumann is not so active in comparison, and no one knows his preferences and requirements at all. Melissa gave a calm analysis. Benoit suggested tentatively, "How about we contact Mr. Neumann again through the forum and ask him directly what he requires of us? After all, it's an equal exchange. What may seem trivial to him is a matter of life and death to us and our teacher." Jin spread his hands helplessly. "My family has declined. Benoit is a marginal descendant who is not valued within the family, and Melissa doesn't even come from a wizarding family. I simply can't offer anything valuable in exchange for our teacher's life." As he spoke, he honestly took out all the belongings he had always carried with him from his storage ring, a standard amplification staff produced by the Exploration Society and purchased from the magic black market, a bunch of cheap spellcasting materials that even Benoit shook his head at, a forward bend-shaped defensive magic weapon inlaid with aquamarine gems, but it was of mid-level grade and not very valuable. Perhaps the only valuable item was the dozens of high-level, high-quality arcane magic stones neatly stacked in a small suitcase. Jin rubbed his hands and added a little awkwardly, "I still have about 40,000 pounds on deposit at the Orland Royal Bank. Haha, if I use gold pounds to pay Mr. Neumann's price, I'm afraid he'll just travel through time and blast me into pieces. It's simply a provocation and an insult." Benoit was also quite frank and direct. "All my assets have been invested in the workshop I founded. The low-level alchemical products it produces are circulated and sold on the magic black market, and the income is not even a fraction of what the Exploration Society makes. This manor will be our shelter and the residence we need for our teacher's training. Even if I were to trade it for it, Mr. Neumann wouldn't be interested. I still have a stock of the anti-forbidden magic spell device that I gave Jin to use last time." Melissa shook her head and interrupted, "What are you thinking? These low-value magical instruments and materials, as well as those low-end industries and money, which one of them can impress an ancient being suspected of being a demigod?" She stood up and walked to the window. After a moment's silence, she turned around and suggested decisively, "The fact is, we simply can't afford the price he would pay. Why don't we just ask him to become his followers and agents? A being like him surely needs spellcasters walking in the real world to put some of his secret plans into action, right? Family and agents, why do they sound like some evil, ancient demon sacrifice ritual to me?" Jin muttered in a low voice, suddenly shrinking his shoulders in fear. The price we pay is our freedom and our souls. This is 100 times more miserable than facing death directly." Melissa rolled her eyes, returned to the sofa and sat down, beginning to analyze it seriously. "Can't you see? Whether it's Mr. Turing or Mr. Neumann, they created forums to share knowledge, and they almost always responded to the requests of the spellcaster members. Moreover, their attitude has always been very friendly. They don't control or enslave anyone as superiors. They are fundamentally different from those chaotic and twisted chaos demons in the other dimension. Humans, elves, burrowed dwarves, and even demons, hostile alien races like us, are no different from ants in the eyes of beings as long-lived as history itself. They treat them all the same, even if they truly have some hidden agenda in creating the spellcaster forum. It's not our place to worry. There's more than one legendary excellency in the forum. Don't they have a way to deal with it? Melissa's logical and rational analysis finally convinced her two close friends, Jin and Benoit. They planned to have Melissa directly approach Mr. Observer and propose that, unable to pay the price equivalent to their lives, they would become his families as repayment. Harvey stared at the flashing text on the magic brain instrument, stunned for a moment before finally grasping the three forum members' intentions. They were actually using the excuse of not being able to pay the equivalent price as an excuse to sell themselves to him in order to repay their debt. This infuriated Harvey. He was a wizard lord living in the northern wastes, and what could he possibly want from three high-level spellcasters? Was he supposed to invite them all to the frontier to tutor him in magic? This was simply a blatant act of refusing to pay his debt. None of the high-level spellcasters were poor. Even a 100,000 gold pound payment from them would significantly alleviate the territory's financial burden. Even 50,000 would be fine. In short, aside from magical materials or high-level artifacts, simply paying them would be far more valuable to Harvey than selling themselves. To maintain the mysterious and powerful image of the observer on the forum, Harvey forced himself not to lose his temper. However, he hinted, with a hint of disdain, that he didn't really need his followers and agents in the real world, a small warning and deterrent. But since the other party truly believed they couldn't afford it, Harvey couldn't afford to waste his labor. He'd just let them be his families, just a few one-way spies and thugs, making it easier for him to monitor the various developments in the Southern Territory's magical world. Besides, these three guys were genuinely high-level spellcasters. With them as his thugs, at least if he needed to go to the Southern Territory to handle matters again, he wouldn't be as timid and embarrassed as before. Observer Neumann, while it's not what I need, it does conform to the principle of equal exchange. In that case, I agree to your proposed payment, astrologer, thank you for your generosity. Then, what kind of ritual or sacrifice would be required to become your familiar, Observer Neumann? Do you mistake me for a demon from another dimension? Haha, how interesting. No sacrificial rituals are necessary. I don't need to resort to these petty tactics to control you. The forum's founding principles clearly include the requirement of freedom. You only need to listen to and comply with my requests when necessary, and strive to put them into action. Observer Neumann, of course, I won't ignore your efforts. If you find yourself in danger while completing my mission, I will provide you with the necessary shelter and assistance. Chapter 213 Magic Microscope. The tail end of midsummer fell amidst the fading cicada chirping, and the harvest season was approaching. This was the second bountiful harvest season for the frontier territory. According to Reiner's preliminary estimates, the crops, enhanced by Egno's magic, would yield several times the amount of last year's crops, not only enough to meet the needs of the territory's over 10,000 people throughout the winter, but also fully cover the food needs for the first half of next year. However, Harvey had no intention of exporting the food. Due to the time traveler's innate tendency to farm and hoard, he was reluctant to give away the golden barley, wheat, and beans, even if they grew mold in the dozens of warehouses he had built, to the greedy nobles in the southern border who preyed on the common people. However, the territory's only export revenue seemed to be the magical steam engine he had personally modified and designed. Although the price was low, the advantage of the technological monopoly was enough to basically cover the gold pounds he spent on importing goods. The territory had already begun planting cotton last winter, and since then, it no longer needed to import large quantities of cotton and linen fabric to supply the garment workshops. The territory now relied entirely on its own production and sales, meeting demand for both staple foods and meat. Even soap production, previously outsourced to the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce, had been rebuilt in the territory by Harvey, who now operated a small-scale production facility, finding great success in the market. The only items still needed to be purchased through the Dragonstone Chamber of Commerce were sugar, salt, spices, and luxury goods that the territory couldn't produce itself, such as Harvey's favorite black tea. Perhaps the only drawback of the pioneer territory was its inability to grow tea, which thrived only in the warm coastal regions of the southern border. Sir, the finished bicycles have been on the market for nearly 2 weeks now. We've even opened a spacious shop in the market area and assigned sales staff from City Hall to promote them diligently. Reiner's tone was a little awkward. But sales aren't promising. It's not that there's something wrong with our product, But it's that the people in the territory simply can't learn to ride a bicycle. It's simply too difficult for them. Harvey distributed the first batch of bicycles to City Hall and the police department, ordering all staff in both departments to learn to ride them as soon as possible. This would not only facilitate their daily work but also serve as a great advertisement. But a week later, less than 30% of the staff had barely learned to ride. When Harvey inspected them, he found most of them with bruises and limps, the result of countless falls while learning to ride. We're all human, so why was I, at 5, able to pedal down a dirt road in the countryside, while these adults struggle to even start? Learning to ride a bicycle can't be influenced by race or genes, right? Harvey grumbled silently, covering his face. In the end, we can only blame the people of this era for their limited experience. Perhaps it's their physical disharmony caused by their cognitive impairment. But I heard that the soldiers in the army learn very quickly. Is it because most of them are young? Reiner nodded and said tactfully, indeed, they ride fast and steadily, but they don't seem to be very interested in bicycles. After leaving the camp on holidays, a large number of soldiers and officers like to hang around outside the modulo R&D factory, peeking in and asking all kinds of questions. The factory guards can't drive them away even with guns. After experiencing the lightning-fast feeling of the modulo flying close to the ground, who would still be interested in the creaking bicycle? Harvey sighed and said helplessly, the first batch of trial modulo vehicles should be rolling off the production line by the end of this month. Pierce has secretly hinted to me several times, looking ridiculously impatient, but the real reason for the delay in the production of the modulaker was actually Harvey's own fault. Chris, having undergone prosthetic limb surgery, had returned to work after less than a week's rest. However, Harvey had suddenly assigned him an additional research project, completely captivating him and preventing him from focusing on the regular production of the modulaker factory. Sir, the glass you've prepared using your method is indeed producing lenses that are much clearer than the usual crystals, Chris exclaimed excitedly, waving his new mechanical prosthetic limb. Harvey had recently given Chris a sketch he'd drawn during his free time, asking him to design and complete the structure according to the sketch, eventually creating a simple microscope. However, this level of magnification clearly wasn't enough for alchemical and biological observations, so Harvey had also added a living source code extracted from beetle ore and demon spirits to the microscope, solidifying the amplification of pure magic energy into 2 energy runes, amplification and detection. Ever since Chris got his magic microscope, he'd been tinkering with it constantly, even between meals and sleep. The microscopic world revealed through its lens felt like a new discovery, completely igniting his research interest. Harvey sat on the couch in the lab, beaming at Chris and Egno as they vied for use of the microscope. He asked, how's it going? Are the observations looking good? It's truly unprecedented. I've used it to observe the magical plants in the plantation, the magically rich minerals, and the flesh and fur of magical creatures. They all appear exactly the same through this instrument as they do with my naked eye. Chris's voice trembled with excitement. Sir, what you said earlier, that beneath the 4 basic elements, there are even smaller ones. Are those unknown elements, observed through this magical instrument? Harvey smiled and nodded, allowing Chris to question him repeatedly without further explanation. It would be easier for them to discover this brand new knowledge, which completely shattered current magical theory, on their own. Egno seized the opportunity to seize the microscope's observation position and carefully dripped a few drops of liquid extracted from the magical plants onto the glass slide. I've never heard of living things swimming in these plant extracts before. And although they are tiny, they are so numerous that I can hardly count them in just one drop. Chris took the dropper and mixed another plant extract into the drop Egno was observing. Within the circular aperture of the microscope, 2 completely different living substances swam freely. Upon contact, they rapidly devoured each other, attempting to assimilate. They look truly bizarre. But most are transparent, allowing for a clear view of their interiors. They lack internal organs and skeletons, and they don't have shells or limbs like insects. Chris grabbed the lab manual and wrote down his findings rapidly. Living matter can only be observed in the flesh and blood of plants and animals. Although these tiny substances also appear in minerals, they do not seem to be active. Although they are arranged in neat and regular patterns under the camera, they do not move at all. Not bad. The observation and summary are very accurate. Harvey clapped his hands lightly, then slowly added, the so-called microscopic matter below the basic elements is what you see. I prefer to call them microorganisms. They are almost everywhere, not just in objects rich in magic. Even if you draw a drop of water from the river, you can see the same scene. Ordinary microorganisms are mostly the cause of food spoilage, wound infection, and various diseases. But they cannot withstand high temperatures and are easily killed. This is why I require boiled water for drinking in the territory, and why I do not approve of the people eating raw meat. Egno scratched his head and thought for a moment, then asked in surprise, "My lord, did you get the inspiration for the entire set of hygiene and epidemic prevention manuals you compiled for the medical center from this? Surgical instruments, gauze dressings for hemostatic ramps, even the work clothes that doctors wear on a daily basis need to be boiled in boiling water every day before use." Harvey nodded. "Of course, this can only treat common illnesses and injuries. If we encounter more serious epidemics or some stubborn chronic diseases, high-temperature disinfection alone will not be of any help." Chapter 214 Vaccine Development. Harvey pointed at the microscope and instructed in a serious tone, "You have also seen through this instrument that among the plants and flesh of creatures rich in magic power, there are living substances that can devour each other. Next, I will need you to conduct a large number of observation experiments to find the living microorganisms among the magical substances that have the strongest devouring and assimilation ability but are harmless themselves. This will be an important basic material for our next research and development of potions." Egno asked doubtfully, "Develop potions? My lord, what type of potion do you need to prepare? As long as you provide the formula and raw materials, I can basically meet your requirements even if I don't need to observe these microorganisms." Harvey shook his head and explained, "It's not that kind of expensive magic potion. What I want is a magic vaccine that can be mass-produced and injected into ordinary people's bodies in advance to prevent disease." Chris was far inferior to Egno in pharmacy, and was even more confused at the moment. Prevention in advance. Will drinking the potion first really work if you don't get sick? I have never heard of this treatment method. Very well. You may utilize all the resources of the medical center and alchemy laboratory for your research and experiments. If necessary, you can make requests to me. I will find a way to obtain any difficult-to-find materials for you." He paused, then patiently reminded, "Remember, you must repeatedly test the drug on animals to verify the optimal dosage and effectiveness. Never test the drug on sick civilians until the research and development phase is complete." A week later, Harvey received a report on the experimental results from Egno and Chris. After tireless observation and experimentation day and night, they, along with their alchemy apprentices and physicians, quickly identified several magical microorganisms that could combat common ailments. Repeated gavages and injections on infected animals have essentially proven the microbial products to be safe and non-toxic. However, a definitive conclusion on their efficacy remains to be drawn. After all, the diseased chickens, ducks, cattle, and sheep are far from comparable to humans. This means the final phase of clinical trials is necessary. Based on past medical records, Egno selected several civilians who had been suffering from chronic illnesses before arriving in the frontier territory. Most of these individuals suffered from chronic ailments that Egno could not treat with his healing techniques. After signing a voluntary clinical trial agreement, they were selected for the drug trial. The healing arts of natural spellcasters and the divine healing arts of church priests are not universally effective. While they can significantly heal external injuries, they are difficult to completely cure for internal ailments like cold plague and bloodworm disease. Harvey was well aware of the terminal illness known as cold plague. Reiner had previously suffered from it and nearly died in Harvey's laboratory before the soul transfer experiment. Although called a plague, the disease itself is not contagious. Instead, it is a fatal illness similar to lung cancer and tuberculosis, common among the poor and vulnerable. Typical symptoms include severe pain, general weakness, and recurrent coughing up blood. Every winter, in the colder regions of the southern kingdoms near the north, large numbers of civilians contracted this disease due to lack of warm clothing or shelter, or due to prolonged outdoor work in the cold. After months of suffering, they tragically collapsed on the roadsides and in the streets. Bloodworm disease was even more common than the cold plague, as it not only occurred frequently in winter but was also highly contagious. Because the lower classes often neglected dietary hygiene, drinking water and food contaminated with pathogens quickly led to bloodworm disease, resulting in bloated, swollen stomachs and suffering. While not fatal immediately, life expectancy was significantly shortened, with few patients surviving past the age of 30. During a previous census of the territory, Harvey had discovered dozens of civilians suffering from both cold plague and bloodworm disease from the hospital's medical records. He immediately had Igno isolate the contagious patients and instituted strict regulations within the territory prohibiting the consumption of raw water and food, as well as regular disinfection and protection of livestock and poultry areas. At the same time, human and animal sewage and feces that were previously discharged directly into the glacial river are now collected through pipes into specially designated underground closed composting pits, and will only be used for farm planting and fertilization after fermentation. But even with this level of sanitation campaign, the number of patients with schistosomiasis in the territory continued to increase slowly and steadily. Every time he concentrated on relieving the pain of these patients and temporarily eliminating the ascites symptoms, Igno would be on the verge of magic exhaustion. While treating the symptoms, not the root cause, he was also miserable. My lord, the 10 civilians with the most serious symptoms of cold plague and schistosomiasis have been selected to participate in this drug trial. Igno pointed to the whole box of magic vaccine potions that he and Chris had prepared together through the night, and said confidently, "We have repeatedly tested it on animals and livestock infected with schistosomiasis, and there is absolutely no problem with its safety." Chris added cautiously, "But anatomical observations have shown that it can only kill the bloodworms that have hatched into adult worms in their bodies, and cannot completely eliminate the worm eggs that are all over the intestines." Harvey was very satisfied with the results achieved in such a short time, and comforted him, "Don't worry, it's only been a week. I believe you will soon be able to improve the perfect magic vaccine and eliminate all patients with schistosomiasis and cold plague in the territory." 10 frail, 6 civilians were brought to a dedicated ward in the infirmary. Each received a half-oral, half-injected potion, then quietly waited for the magically rich vaccine to take effect. The first to show clinical symptoms were those suffering from the cold plague. Their fever and pain subsided, and they subsequently vomited large amounts of dark, foul-smelling, clotted blood. About 3 hours later, their frequent coughing and expectoration had largely subsided. It really works. Those black clots are symptoms of the cold plague's lungs. Once expelled, a few more oral doses will completely heal and repair their eroded lungs. Igno excitedly waved his hand. The infectious bloodworm disease was much more complicated. After taking the medicine, the patients vomited and had diarrhea, excreting large numbers of bloodworm eggs. After tossing and turning all night, the abdominal edema slowly began to subside, but it was impossible to verify whether it would recur in the short term. Harvey wasn't disappointed. Instead, he smiled and handed the two a list, adding fuel to their research. "Next, while you perfect the cold plague potion and bloodworm vaccine, you must also develop more magical microbial medicines." The two bewildered men took the list, their eyes fixed on it. Plague vaccine. Malaria vaccine. Smallpox vaccine. Cold plague medicine, enhanced. Bloodworm vaccine, enhanced version with therapeutic effects. Chapter 215 RoboCop vs. Bloodline Warrior. After finishing all the important tasks at hand, Harvey finally found time to fulfill his promise and once again summoned Mr. Inner Demon from the alternate dimension through a sacrificial ritual. The higher-ranking demon, visiting the frontier territory for the second time, was noticeably less reserved, no longer confining his activities to the castle and the barracks. Instead, he actively invited Harvey to tour the entire frontier territory. Since Mr. Inner Demon had provided him with free assistance numerous times, Harvey naturally couldn't find a reason to refuse. So, leading a group of bloodline warriors as his personal guards, they embarked on a grand tour of the territory. At the market, Harvey accepted a street snack purchased by his personal guards, a toasted wheat pancake smeared with cheese and honey on both sides, and handed it to Mr. Inner Demon. Mr. Inner Demon, I'm confused. You demons are also keen on ordinary human food? Haha, this alchemical prosthesis I prepared for you does not have the ability to eat. Inner Demon took the snacks handed by Harvey, held it in his hands and stared at it for a moment, then returned it to Harvey, and then explained with a chuckle, "Eat? No, we don't need to swallow the food directly into the stomach. It is naturally different from the way you humans eat. What we need is the willpower with many emotions attached to the food." He paused, and took a glass of low-alcohol sweet wine brewed from wild fruits from the guard who came over. Although the willpower contained in these foods is pitifully thin, the desires and emotions contained are extremely complicated, just like unknown candies in a box. Each grain is rich in taste. Harvey smiled and shook his head. This way of eating is indeed very unique, but since a lot of food was bought, it naturally cannot be wasted. He turned around and ordered the guards to distribute the snacks bought from the stalls in the market area. A greedy young guard took the honey pie from the lord with trepidation, shoving it into his mouth with a grin and chewing it vigorously. Ugh! Lord, how come the honey and cheese in this pie aren't sweet at all? The pie, which was originally soft, tastes like wax. Walking side by side, the inner demon swayed slightly and quickened his pace awkwardly, causing Harvey to roll his eyes. They quickly left the market area and arrived at the newly built stadium in the castle area. It was approaching evening, and a circle of stone staircase stands surrounded the spacious stadium. A large number of people, leaving work, lined up at the 4 entrances and exits, registering and entering the stadium to take their seats. In the center of the field, 2 teams were gathered together, some doing stretching exercises and some huddled together, their heads hunched over, discussing something. They all wore specially made leather armor and leather helmets, their chests dyed red and blue to distinguish their teams. Is this the place you've been talking about, inviting me to watch that rugby game? Harvey led the inner demon to a seat in the VIP stands reserved for lords, where a waiter immediately and attentively brought him a chilled juice. Yes, this stadium can currently accommodate 500 spectators simultaneously. After further renovations and upgrades, it will eventually be a large stadium capable of accommodating 2,000 civilians. The inner demon nodded in understanding. Then rubbed his hands and exclaimed expectantly, Such a strong sense of desire permeates all around me. Excitement, anticipation, pride, longing. Haha. There are even people in the stadium secretly imagining themselves declaring their love to their beloved after winning. How fascinating. Harvey shook his head and smiled wryly. Fortunately, the demon, out of courtesy, never actively sensed his emotions. Otherwise, it would be like running naked in his presence. Pierce rushed to the stands and informed Harvey that the game was ready. Harvey nodded, stood up, and walked to the front. The people in the surrounding stands immediately noticed the Lord's presence and stood up to greet him, waving and cheering. Harvey smiled and walked over to the sound-transmitting magic stone-powered speaker. My people. Players on the field. Good evening. I declare the first Frontier Territory rugby match now officially open. The atmosphere in the stadium instantly ignited, and the players on the field knelt on one knee and saluted in the direction of Harvey's stands. Uriel and Max stood on the field, warming up, huddled with 9 other colleagues from the National Police Agency, discussing tactics in low voices. Boss, can we really defeat those bloodline warriors? I hear they were all transcendents, blessed with immense powers by their lords, capable of unleashing terrifying flames and frost from their bodies at the drop of a hat. Uriel feigned anger. You worthless creatures. They're not allowed to use their transcendental abilities during the match. Going head on with us using just their bodies. Humph, no matter how tough flesh and blood are, how can they compare to our steel? The Iron Shield team, established by the National Police Agency, was composed of members who had undergone alchemical prosthetics. Almost every one of them possessed strong and durable cybernetic limbs. Any single robotic officer could easily subdue 7 or 8 drunken lawbreakers in the territory. Max warned, we're definitely outmatched in terms of speed, so when the match begins, try to engage them and avoid getting out of their way. Remember the tactics we've mastered in training. Show these arrogant soldiers a lesson. A sharp whistle echoed throughout the stadium. The National Police Agency's Iron Shield team, with their distinctive blue shield emblem painted on their chests, took first kickoff. Uriel took a deep breath, took a few steps, and launched a flying kick, sending the ball high into the air, landing directly at his team's forward line. The ball bounced off the ground, only to be scooped up by Max, who landed with a nimble roll. He didn't rush forward with the ball recklessly. Instead, he quickly glanced sideways, watching for his teammates on either wing to catch up. Then, using his powerful prosthetic leg, he plowed a shallow groove into the ground and launched himself directly into the double team. The powerful impact sent the oncoming players sprawling, but more opponents, already prepared, swarmed forward, quickly pinning Max down and wrestling for the ball. The ball arced and landed in the hands of an Iron Shield player on the wing. Unfortunately, he was stopped by a Northlander soldier who had been hunkering down on the sideline. He struggled forward a few steps, but before he could pass again, he was pinned to the ground. Possession was lost. The whistle blew again, marking the Northlander's turn. The Orc commander, who had so often dazzled in target practice, took the lead, weaving in and out like a nimble Steppenwolf. Frequently, flanked by soldiers covering him, he kept pace, sending Iron Shield officers flying and falling. Nearing the end zone, he came face to face with Uriel. The trainee superintendent swung his mechanical arm directly at his shoulder, attempting to pin him down and reclaim the ball. The orc battalion commander curled his lips into a scornful smile, and actually threw the football in his hand to the ground. It passed directly through the gap between Urio's legs, then bounced up and flew accurately into the goal. Good boy. They even learned the difference between man and ball. Harvey couldn't help laughing, standing up and clapping his hands vigorously, making Vaughn, who was cheering around the field after the goal, blush excitedly. Harvey smiled and turned his head to Mr. Interdemon and asked, "How was it?" "I didn't lie to you, this game was really exciting." The upper demon sat in his chair, shaking his head, and sighed in an intoxicated tone. Indeed, such surging emotions, such rich willpower, it was simply delicious. Chapter 216, Magic Motorcycle Test Drive. The thrilling and highly entertaining rugby match concluded with a victory of the northern team, composed of territorial soldiers. They triumphantly circled the field, waving their arms in celebration, enjoying the cheers and admiration of the crowd in the stands like battlefield heroes. Harvey beckoned the team captain, Vaughn, to the stands and personally pinned a brass star emblem, representing a victory, on his leather armor shoulder. The orc captain excitedly knelt on one knee, touching his forehead to the back of Harvey's outstretched hand in the proper manner of a bloodline warrior. Pierce and Arslan gathered together, whispering about the match's outcome. In terms of strength and endurance, the extraordinary warriors who have awakened their talents are indeed no match for these police department players who have partial iron bodies. After all, most of them have modified their limbs, and the practicality and advantages in the game are very obvious. Pierce smacked his lips and concluded, but when it comes to the level of coordination, they are far inferior to these soldiers of the Northern Army team. They have honed their tacit understanding on the battlefield of life and death, and they are more skilled and advanced in tactics. Egno and Chris, who were sitting on the other side, were completely different. They couldn't even understand the rules of the game, but they were also infected by the warm atmosphere and couldn't stop clapping and laughing. Chris approached Harvey and suggested, "Sir, why don't we all undergo extensive alchemical prosthetics? If each of them had 4 rock-solid mechanical legs and 6 to 8 mechanical tentacles to replace their hands, wouldn't the games be even more intense and exciting?" Harvey couldn't help but roll his eyes at his perverse idea and quickly changed the subject, asking, "Have you completed the commissioning of the first batch of magic vehicles? Have you made any new progress in the development of magic vaccines and potions? How do you have time to come watch the game?" Chris was immediately shocked by these soul-piercing questions and retreated silently with a wry smile. Before the harvest season arrived, Chris, under Harvey's urging, finally completed the commissioning of the magic vehicle, bringing this groundbreaking magic-powered vehicle to industrial production. The original internal combustion engine, the core power generator, was replaced by a modified magic steam engine, which could be powered by either direct injection of liquid magic energy or compressed gaseous magic energy injected through a focused energy array. Harvey had no idea about gearbox design, so he could only verbally instruct Chris to create a sophisticated gear module to enhance and regulate the transmission of magical energy. The frame was entirely assembled using separate molds cast in the blast furnace steel mills of the territory's industrial zone. A small amount of the magical mineral, lizard scale ore, purchased from the Exploration Society, was added to the steel to greatly enhance its ductility and magical affinity. As for the details like the lights, instrument panel, electrical components, and auxiliary wiring, Harvey had no regard for them, keeping things as simple as possible. Even the braking system used the crudest form of foot-operated metal brake pads. After all, in this world, handcrafting a mass-produced power vehicle with only manual labor and a bit of alchemical expertise was a highly achievable feat, and Harvey couldn't expect perfection in every aspect. This also means that vehicles like the modulo vehicle are currently only capable of being piloted by physically strong bloodline warriors and police officers with robotic prosthetics. To navigate the rugged wilderness and mountain forests at high speeds, they rely on exceptional vision and reflexes to replace the vehicle's lack of steering assistance systems for emergency obstacle avoidance. Braking also requires a strong physique, requiring a miraculous slam on the brake pedal to barely bring the speeding modulo vehicle to a stop. Even so, during prototype test drives, several bloodline warriors, due to their unfamiliar control techniques, suffered rollovers and collisions, requiring weeks of hospitalization before recovering. Thump, thump, thump. Boom, boom, boom. The roar of the modulo vehicle start echoed throughout the playground, and a large number of Northern Army soldiers gathered to watch, salivating over the row of shiny, new single-person vehicles, exuding a metallic and mechanical aesthetic. Wayne and Dave stood side by side, their faces fixed longingly on Captain Vaughn, who sat astride the brand-new mod scooter, his head bowed as he listened to the Lord's repeated instructions. He was the first test driver of this batch of fully fledged mod scooters. Wayne muttered, "Only those who can ride this thing through the mountains and forests are true knights. Those clumsy fellows we saw on the backs of horses and beasts last time we went to lay with the Lord are nothing compared to us. Understood, Lord? Yes, yes, I'll hold the handlebars firmly. Okay, just tap the brake pedal lightly when turning. Yes, how light is light? No problem, just go in circles." Oh, I get it," Vaughn babbled incoherently at Harvey's theoretical instructions, but his entire attention was focused on the metal beast beneath him. He gripped the handlebars tightly and twisted the accelerator, waiting for Harvey's command to release the brake pedal and take off. Harvey stepped back and nodded to his test driver, signaling him to begin the driving demonstration. With a more intense roar, the magic car kicked up a cloud of dust and rushed out like a wild horse. Vaughn felt a buzzing in his ears, and the roar of the dust almost drowned out everything else. The car shook violently beneath him, and he had to fight to keep his balance to avoid being thrown out. Compared to the prototype he had previously tested, it was more than twice as fast. Vaughn keenly noticed the subtle difference and couldn't help but twist the throttle handle again, causing the energy inscription on the magic power engine on the front of the car to burst into fierce light, and he increased his speed to the maximum. In almost an instant, he rushed from one end of the military camp to the other, slowing down to circle the flagpole, and then once again cut through the wind and waves towards Harvey. With a slam of his foot on the brake pedal, a resounding thud punctured the front of the modulo, the rear end tilting up and nearly flipping over. Vaughn's sturdy body held the car steady, and he finally managed to stop. Though Harvey smiled and praised Vaughn's driving skills, he couldn't help but chuckle bitterly. No shock-absorbing suspension, no electronic brakes, and no steering assist. Getting out of the way was easier than stopping. If the driver hadn't been a bloodline warrior with awakened supernatural powers, anyone else would have flipped over and been hospitalized. He recalled the shabby pickup truck he'd driven in his previous life, the one everyone despised. If it were in his car now, it would probably be considered as good as a Rolls-Royce. After all, in terms of industrial manufacturing technology and design, the shabby pickup truck was far more advanced than this modulo. While the current powertrain of this modicar uses a metaphysical version, its response is far too sluggish. Furthermore, with a steel frame devoid of any cushioning, and steering and braking systems that rely entirely on manual intervention, the driving experience is unpredictable. Even so, upon exiting the vehicle after the test drive, Vaughn's face was ablaze with smiles. He rubbed his hands and scratched his head, unable to take his eyes off the vehicle, his satisfaction evident. Harvey sighed helplessly and turned to the others eagerly waiting. "Anyone else want to try it?" "Me. Your Excellency." "Let me try. I can drive better than Captain Vaughn." "Your Excellency." "Let me do it. I can drive it around the territory." Almost instantly, he was surrounded by a group of ferocious territorial officers. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217 Ancient Ruins Deep Underground. Deep within the mountains on the northern slopes of Jackdaw Ridge, a massive alchemical beast, over 30 meters long and 6 meters in diameter, emerged from a deep drilling tunnel with a resounding roar. This was a magical shield machine designed by Harvey himself, a massive underground alchemical beast transformed from the soul of a giant phagocytic worm. Infused with 10 units of liquid magic energy each time, it could excavate approximately 3 to 5 kilometers through the solid mountain, depending on whether the area it was passing through is composed of rock or soil. 3 engineers from the Territory Defense Force emerged from the compartment behind the shield machine and, sweating profusely, jumped down. "Damn it, this underground monster gets incredibly hot once it's running. Staying in the cabin inside it is like being roasted in a steamer from all directions." The team leader took off his sweaty uniform shirt and loudly called out to the engineers to spray cold water on the shield machine to cool it down. Notify the territory's energy department that the liquid magic energy in the North Slope underground base has been exhausted. Ask them to deliver another 30 units of energy tanks today, the assistant said cautiously. Boss, I sent a message to the energy department when you set out this morning, but until now, there's no reply. Do I really have to urge them again? The engineer team leader was stunned for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, they're pretending to be dead again, aren't they? Ever since the magic car factory started production, these snobs have given priority to supplying the already scarce liquid energy to the factory. They've been perfunctory and delaying us more than once, but then he thought about it again. Since the North Slope base started exploration work, 7 or 8 excavation routes have been opened in the past 2 months, but basically nothing has been gained. Although several copper and iron veins were discovered, they were all buried deep underground, making mining extremely difficult and expensive, making them completely unsuitable for development. A crystal sapphire vein, discovered by chance, was deemed of low quality by the mineral experts in the alchemy lab, with little potential for profitable mining. We only have less than 10 units of liquid mana left. Boss, should we continue exploration today? The team leader, clutching his iron lunchbox, pored over the exploration map. He paused in thought as he gazed at a blank area on the map, approximately 3 miles from the caverns at the North Slope base. This area lay directly below the main excavation route, and according to the Lord's exploration requirements, it was necessary to avoid the excavation route. After all, digging downwards was far more difficult than digging parallel to the main excavation route, and it was also more likely to encounter geological faults, causing the shield machine to accidentally fall or become stuck in cracks deep within the mountain. The risk was too high. But after 2 months of personally operating this mechanical beast, I've developed a certain rapport. After all, it's a magical machine rumored to be crafted from an ancient monster. Whenever it discovers a suspected mineral vein during excavation, it automatically adjusts its course, rumbling toward the mineralized area. And that empty area below the main route is where the TBM attempts to drill down whenever it passes by. The driver needs to exert all his magical energy to keep it parallel to the target. So there must be something good down there. Maybe gold, or even that magical core that the Lord values most. The team leader pounded his fist on the exploration plan and made a decisive statement: pour all the remaining energy into the TBM. Our next exploration goal is to follow it below the main tunnel. By the time Harvey received the news and rushed to the North Slope underground base with his personal guards, it was already late at night. However, there was no natural light in the underground base, so the time of day didn't matter. The Defense Force engineering team operating the magic tunnel boring machine, MTM, for exploration discovered, during an unscheduled exploration today, a relic deeper in the earth that showed signs of human activity, an ancient ruin. What's your name? Tell me about your discovery today, Harvey asked, looking at the dusty and sweaty engineering team leader. Lord, my name is Pep, one of the 3 operators of the magic tunnel boring machine, MTM, and the 3rd team leader of the North Slope base exploration team. He wiped his face sheepishly, pointing to the exploration map with a trembling hand as he explained to Harvey, it's not just me, it's the other 2 operators too. Every time we pass through this section of the main excavation tunnel, the TTM emits a signal indicating it's attempting to dig down. So today, we decided to take a risk. Pep, a former stonemason, had a good understanding of various rocks and minerals. So, after digging down to the TTM sensing area, he boldly opened the sealed hatch to investigate. Surprisingly, they discovered a similar underground cavity in this area, surrounded by numerous fissures of varying sizes. A terrifying humming sound occasionally emanated from it, indicating that despite being nearly 100 meters underground, there was still airflow. After donning a helmet inlaid with the illuminating magic stone and leading 2 crew members down a deactivated shield machine, they were immediately horrified by the sight within. In the light of their headlamps, hundreds of massive stalactites, like crystal prisms, rose from the ground, each 7 or 8 meters in diameter. It resembled a deep, crystalline underground forest, towering before them. An ecstatic look instantly emerged on Harvey's face, and he asked in a trembling voice, "Are you sure that what you saw were a large number of crystal stalactite columns? Under the light source you brought, they would reflect a crystal blue light." Pep nodded and answered honestly, "Sure, sir, but what's even stranger is that around these columns, we found many traces of artificial excavation. There are smooth stone steps, stone plates engraved with many strange patterns, and even some incomplete stone sculptures, but they are severely worn and it is impossible to tell what they are. He scratched his head and added shamelessly, "We originally wanted to break up some of the crystal columns and bring them back to you to see, but those crystal columns are so hard that they are almost integrated. The shovels even sent out sparks and could only leave a few scratches on them. If it is really the same magical substance as the magic stone veins under the territory castle, of course it cannot be decomposed and excavated with ordinary tools. Only by relying on energy-absorbing beetles to devour and transform them can the pure magic energy contained in it be obtained." Harvey turned and ordered his guards, "Notify the Ministry of Energy to urgently dispatch 30 units of liquid magic energy. I will take a shield machine and go to the underground ruins in person." As Dallin was shocked, "My lord, just arrange for the bloodline warriors and these engineering soldiers to go down. There may be many unknown dangers deep underground. I don't recommend you to take risks yourself." Harvey shook his head and decisively rejected the chief consultant's advice. He said in a deep voice, "If it is really an ancient relic existing in the magic stone vein, as a spellcaster, I must go and see it myself. Those ancient secrets buried in the long river of history are too tempting." Chapter 218 Mystery. Harvey staggered out of the tunnel boring machine's cabin and removed the filter mask from his head. His face was pale from dehydration due to the intense heat. This underground cavern was much larger than the natural caverns at the North Slope base. It wasn't a typical circular cavern, but rather a narrow, long corridor, its widest area approximately 100 meters in diameter. It was surrounded by steep, fissured cliffs, and a constant whistling sound of wind drifted from deep within the cracks. The ground was uneven, and where the slopes were steep, stone steps, clearly man-made, stretched downwards into the distance. "Pep, based on your experience, how old are these stone steps?" Harvey wasn't an expert archaeologist, so he relied on the experienced stonemasons on the construction team. Pep approached, holding a piece of illuminating magic stone, carefully examining the marks of chisel and axe carving on the steps, even carefully picking up the dust trapped in the incisions and examining them closely. "My lord, judging by the degree of weathering and wear, these stone steps, which were excavated on the spot, have probably existed for hundreds of years, or even longer. After all, the underground is not exposed to wind, rain, ice, and snow, and the air is very dry, so the stone can be preserved longer." "I agree with the opinion of this engineering stonemason," as Dallin interrupted. "The human town closest to Jackdaw Ridge, Jackdaw Town, has only been established for 30 years. Grizzly Castle, under the management of Earl Figan's family, has a history of only 80 years, so these ancient stone steps are unlikely to be related to the humans of the southern kingdoms. Could it be an ancient kingdom in the south? Were there human kingdoms near Jackdaw Ridge at that time?" Harvey was really not good at studying history. "I remember that St. Valen was founded less than 100 years ago," as Dallin sighed. "More than 100 years ago, the demons crossed the Divide Spine Mountains and invaded the human kingdom. At that time, there were only the 7 major wizard kingdoms and a few aristocratic city-states closely affiliated with them. It was not until the spellcasters formed an alliance with the church that the Divide Spine Mountains were used as the boundary to divide the southern kingdoms from the northern wasteland." Harvey patted his chief advisor's shoulder. "Whether human or demonic, the presence of traces of intelligent life here means there's a high probability of the magical core we've been searching for. Let's go and take a look." The shield machine had made several trips back and forth, sending down a large number of bloodline warriors and defense force soldiers. Working in groups of 2 or 3, they quickly explored the entire narrow cavern along the mountainside, planting magical torches embedded with illuminating magic stones at various locations. When Harvey, along with Asdalin and his personal guards, reached the crystal pillars, he couldn't help but sigh in admiration. Compared to the massive stone pillars before them, the crystal pillar cave beneath the castle was like the difference between a sapling and a towering tree. It would take 7 or 8 soldiers with outstretched arms to embrace it. The tallest crystal pillar rose straight from the ground to its summit, reaching even higher than the illuminating magic stone could detect. It was likely at least 30 meters high, the equivalent of a 10-story modern building. Asdalin leaned close to Harvey's ear and whispered, "My lord, have you noticed that the conditions here are remarkably similar to the crystal cave beneath our castle? The mountain walls are also riddled with ventilation cracks, and the interior is incredibly dry. Aside from the signs of ancient human activity, everything else was identical." Harvey also noticed that while these massive crystal pillars had the familiar prismatic shape, their surfaces weren't covered in milky white stalactites like the ones beneath the castle. Instead, they stood here as pure crystals. Could it be that they weren't originally pure crystal pillars, but were instead mined and polished into their current form? Harvey felt there were too many doubts. How did the ancient people active underground get here, and what technology did they use to mine these crystals? Guards immediately arrived with a delicate iron cage and scooped out the dozens of energy-absorbing beetles they had brought. They struggled to move their legs, spinning around on the ground like headless flies. Then, quickly determining their direction, they formed a line like ants and began crawling towards the crystal pillars before them. As expected, this was also a vein of magically rich magic stone. Harvey's eyes narrowed as he watched the energy-absorbing beetles clinging to the crystal pillars rapidly transform from their juvenile form into mature forms the moment their bodies and tentacles touched the crystal surface. Within seconds, they erupted in brilliant fluorescence, then, skipping their reproductive phase, quickly doomed and fell from the crystal pillars to the ground, dying instantly. As Dallin picked up a beetle and examined it, exclaiming in amazement, They've absorbed enough magical energy to transform directly from insect form to mineral form in just a few seconds. The pure magical energy contained within these magic stone crystals was even greater and richer than the high-level magic stone veins beneath the castle. We may have stumbled upon a legendary magical core recorded in ancient texts. This meant that all the magic stone veins, large and small, in the Jackdaw Ridge mountain range, which straddles the southern kingdom in the northern wastes, might originate from this very source. A bloodline warrior guard took the shovel from the engineer, walked over to the crystal pillar, took a deep breath, and urged all the blood to rush to his heart. He immediately activated his awakened bloodline power, great strength. He swung the shovel with both hands, striking the corner of the crystal pillar in front of him. A loud ding echoed through the cave, and the shovel broke in two. The tip flew off to nowhere, leaving only a shallow mark on the edge of the crystal pillar. A bloodline warrior with awakened great strength was no match for the sturdy engineer. Even he couldn't knock a shard from the crystal pillar, indicating that the crystal pillars were probably as hard as diamond. It seems that if we want to draw magic energy from this, we can only rely on creatures like energy-absorbing beetles, which use a rapid conversion method. Harvey couldn't imagine how the ancients who discovered this vein of minerals obtained their magical energy. Did they happen to raise a large number of magical beetles that feed on pure magic? While Harvey was lost in thought, he was suddenly yanked by the bloodline warrior beside him. Before he could react, he was immediately carried on the shoulders of the warrior and rushed towards the shield machine. What is going on? Put me down, the guard carrying Harvey answered without a breath as he ran. Sir, the guards on alert just sent a warning from not far away. We must first transfer you to the metal cabin of the shield machine to ensure your safety. If necessary, we need to send you out of the underground first. Warning? What's going on? Put me down first. Don't stuff me into the cabin. Harvey supported himself with a hatch of the shield machine and finally landed on his feet. At this time, a non-commissioned officer of the Defense Army ran over from a distance, knelt on one knee with a panicked look on his face and saluted Harvey. My lord, a swarm of strange beetles suddenly emerged from those densely packed cracks in the mountain. The number is simply incalculable. It's like a swarm of insects forming a wave, heading straight for this crystal column area. Harvey finally breathed a sigh of relief and glared at the reckless guards who had carried him away. Don't panic. These beetles are harmless to humans. Quickly protect Mr. Asdalin and retreat into the cabin. Then completely shut down the shield machine's magic power core. Otherwise, when these bugs get close, they will suck all the liquid magic energy stored in the energy tank, and we will be trapped underground. Chapter 219 Magic Core and Energy Ranch. Magic Core. The inner demon held his chin in an anthropomorphic posture and fell into thought. So you humans named the source of magic energy the core. This is a rather novel term, so it comes from the ancient wizards' conjecture and research on the source of magic power, but it's actually not accurate. Harvey humbly asked for advice. Spellcasters can draw magic power directly from the magic network, and magic stones are also magical minerals that are naturally formed after the energy of the magic network space escapes into the real world. Isn't this common sense recognized for thousands of years? So you think that there must be some kind of source core of magic power in the magic network space, and the same is true for the formation of magic stone veins. Mr. Inner Demon laughed, his tone a little teasing. My race has existed in the magic network for who knows how long, But I have never heard of the rumor of the source core. When we were roaming the ley line together, I once asked you about it. The energy channels that densely thread throughout the ley line are like blood vessels in living organisms in the real world. So, I believe that at the source of these energy channels, there must be a heart-like structure or carrier, continuously supplying energy to the entire ley line. The inner demon clapped his hands and laughed heartily. A very apt analogy, Mr. Clothuzid. Your thinking and associative abilities are far more avant-garde and bold than those of most spellcasters I've known, but after patiently listening to Mr. Inner Demon's detailed account, Harvey realized that his previous theoretical knowledge, and the knowledge he prided himself on as a time traveler, were actually limited in certain respects. There was no such thing as a source of magical power. The ley line, a giant with its densely packed magical vessels, did not possess a core organ similar to a heart. The inner demons, who had long inhabited the ley line, were also unaware of the source and destination of these energy channels. They simply stretched across the ley line, unchanged for millennia. But I once guessed that the demons living in the energy pipelines might have a strange symbiotic relationship with the magic pipelines, and the magic stone veins you found deep underground in the mountain and those strange energy-absorbing beetles might have the same connection, the inner demon murmured thoughtfully. Anyway, there is no research to prove that the magic core cannot be a living being, right? As Dallin placed a can of sealed liquid magic energy in front of Harvey and said in a cheerful tone, "My lord, the facts are just as you expected. After using the improved version of the blood summoning instrument to convert a beetle ore captured in the underground cave into energy form, we indeed obtained a higher concentration of liquid magic energy. The energy-absorbing beetles would actually produce different concentrations of pure magic energy in their bodies depending on the quality and purity of the magic stone veins they absorbed." This was also Harvey's guess after being reminded by Mr. Inner Demon. He didn't expect it to be confirmed so soon. It seems that although we didn't find the so-called magic core, we did unexpectedly obtain a large number of magic stone vein crystal pillars, as well as a huge swarm of insects living nearby. The shortage of liquid magic energy can finally be completely alleviated. It was very difficult to maintain the power supply of magic gun ammunition and magic vehicles relying solely on the small mineral vein under Harvey Castle and a small group of artificially bred energy-absorbing beetles. Harvey also had to reserve a portion of the liquid magic energy production to supply the additional needs of the shield machine operation, which made it even more stretched. Can you estimate how many energy-absorbing beetles live in the underground veins? As Dallin shook his head, exasperated. There are simply too many. Every 3 days, they surge out of the mountain's fissures like a tide, clinging to the magic stone crystal pillars to absorb energy. Some mature forms, having absorbed enough magic power, immediately enter their reproductive phase, laying eggs and then dying. Soldiers from the engineering department must be dispatched immediately to collect a beetle or otherwise, if more than 12 hours pass, the ore will immediately weather and dissolve, being absorbed and assimilated by the magic stone crystal pillars again. As expected, the intertransformative and fluid nature of magic power's 3 forms was clearly revealed. Beetle ore and ordinary magic stone represent its solid form, while the liquid magic energy extracted from magic spirits and molten spirit ore represents another form. And the magic power drawn from the magic network space through meditation by the caster is an ethereal, gaseous form. The 3 states are constantly changing and flowing with each other. This is the true nature of magic power. Harvey snapped out of his reverie and, smiling, jokingly said to Hasdarin, "I now believe this underground mineral vein we discovered may become the territory's most important energy source in the future. We must quickly master the insect swarm's activity patterns and manage our energy pastures like a shepherd tending cattle and sheep." After Hasdarin left, Harvey returned to his desk and picked up the ancient historical document he had copied from the Magic Network Forum Encyclopedia. Grabbing a piece of white paper, Harvey began hand-drawing a simple map of the region. He used a thick horizontal line to represent the Divine Spine Mountains, which stretched across the middle of the continent. A circle represented the Pioneer Territory to the north, and a diamond represented the Magic Stone Vein beneath the mountains of Jackdaw Territory. He then followed the Divine Spine line to its western end and drew a triangle there, representing the Magic Stone mining area in the Evil Moon Mountains, recently discovered by the Union and the Wizarding Kingdom. Why is it that the Evil Moon mine has already begun mining, yet there's been no news of the energy-absorbing beetles associated with Magic Stone? Could these beetles only survive north of the Divine Spine Mountains? Then what's the reason they can't thrive in the southern reaches? The Wizarding Kingdoms and Federations in the south also control several large and small magic stone veins, right? The largest mining area is still in the dwarven borough kingdom of Hill's Breath, and there's no sign of beetle activity there either. The patterns on the stone discs copied by engineers from the underground ruins were so blurred and indistinguishable due to their age that even the living fossil Arstalin struggled to discern the true origin of the twisted patterns. A thorough search of the underground ruins revealed nothing of value except for clusters of magic stone crystal pillars, weathered stone steps and stone slabs, and broken stone carvings. Not to mention ancient murals or paleontological remains, not even the tools used to mine magic stone or carve it remained, leaving Harvey baffled. These mysterious ancient figures seemed to appear out of thin air in the magic stone mines 100 meters underground, quietly tinkering with something, and then vanishing completely as if by vapor. Even if they reached there through some ancient teleportation array, there would at least be traces of the array ritual. Moreover, who was the first to reach there and construct the teleportation array? This remains an unsolvable paradox and question. Could it be that in ancient times, some extraordinary beings, more mysterious than wizards, existed, who could use some secret method to directly penetrate the thick mountains and reach the unknown depths of the earth? Chapter 220, Bounty for Killing. In the Evil Moon Mountains, in Blackstone City, a frontier war fortress on the border of the wizarding kingdom of Orland, at dusk, a man in a black double-breasted frock coat trudged through the bustling streets of the tavern district and pushed open the door of a private club. Mr. Willie. Good evening, Matthews, you're finally here. The first-floor lobby of the private club was sparsely populated, with those scattered around on the sofas constantly greeting the incoming man. Matthews Willie raised his black hat with a finger, saluted everyone, and hurried upstairs. Two people were already waiting for him in a lounge on the second floor. Did you also receive Duncan's spell message? Can you verify its authenticity? Matthews asked impatiently as soon as he sat down. The two men in the room exchanged a glance and replied with certainty, even if your location is compromised, the enemy will never know our locations. All matters concerning Duncan were handled through you alone. Matthews nodded in agreement, unable to suppress a long sigh. Mystery be damned. We all thought he'd perished, but where has he been hiding these past 6 years? What exactly happened during that battle? The message delivered by the spell courier simply revealed its identity. This high-level spellcaster, once a close ally of Matthews and the other three, directly requested their assistance to investigate Tyrion White, a high-ranking priest of the Church of Radiance, currently in Black Market City. If necessary, he could be secretly eliminated after uncovering clues to the unsolved case. To this end, Duncan offered a price that greatly intrigued the three men, an ancient secret technique passed down from his family, a high-level, 8-ring creative spell from a legendary spellcaster. Until we understand what has happened to Duncan these past few years, I don't recommend granting his request. Matthews pondered for a moment, then made a cautious assessment. True, while Tyrion White has always been on our kill list, we must also be wary of a vicious trap designed to capture us all. The three people in the room, including Matthews Willie, were all members of the Battle Mage Corps, stationed year-round at the Battle of the Evil Moon Mountains. The only difference was that Matthews was a native of the wizarding kingdom of Orland, while his two companions were spellcasters from the Union. Within the Church of Light lay the Divine Punishment faction, hostile to magicians. Similarly, radical groups within the magical world harbored hatred for the Church. These groups often operated in the shadows, operating in small secret societies and occasionally attacking the Church. It's safe to say that despite the less than century-long peace pact between spellcasters and the Church, undercurrents of conflict and bloodshed never ceased. Then don't act rashly. Find a way to test the Church and see how they react. That'll clearly tell you if there's a problem. Eric, have the Church's agents stationed in Black Rock City mobilize as soon as possible. Matthews Willie was clearly the leader of the three-person group, while the other two listened quietly to his plans. I'll explore special channels to learn about Duncan's situation. I'll also contact spellcasters from other secret societies to assist us in our operations. There weren't many high-ranking battle mages stationed in Black Rock City year-round. Unlike the rotating Union spellcasters, most of them had their own residences in the city's Mage Quarter, often equipped with laboratories for their own research. Matthews Willie returned to his quarters and carefully checked to see if the warning spell he had left in his laboratory had been triggered. He then recast a shielding spell across the entire laboratory to prevent any malicious observers from observing his future actions. He pulled a delicate brass instrument from the sealed safe, carefully placing it on the laboratory desk. With remarkable skill, He removed a magic stone and inserted it into the recess on the side of the instrument. A miniature magic circle on the instrument's base instantly activated, and Matthews deftly pressed the keypad, entering his anonymous codename, Stormwalker. "Mr. Son of Flame, have you arrived in Black Rock City? When can we meet?" After patiently waiting for about half an hour, the Son of Flame member's codename on the forum finally began to slowly flicker silver, indicating that they were online and had received Matthew's private message. "Firechild, Mr. Stormwalker, you're not going to spread the word about my arrival in Black Rock City, are you? Bullshit. I don't want to be mercilessly mocked by my former battle mages the moment I step foot in Black Rock City." The two had experienced the recent attack on the church's witch hunters and had long since exchanged secret codes, revealing their true identities. It was fate that they turned out to be fellow mages who had briefly served together. As for the Son of Fire, Phil Holden, he had come to Black Rock City because he had helped Harvey deal with the attackers from within the Union, and was suspected of being implicated and forced to serve briefly as punishment. Although the pro-church faction in the combat department tattered initially in this internal conflict, Phil's relentless and decisive action, killing his nominal colleague on the spot, had also become somewhat culpable in the debate among the various parties. However, this man, who bore the title of the Union's chief disciple, was actually a lonely elemental brute, long since half-exiled by his master. He paid no heed to the rhetoric of these magical politicians, accepting his guilt and punishment with a deadpan air. This forced Chief Sereth to intervene personally, reluctantly arranging a short-term service in the demonic battlefield as punishment. "Stormwalker, do you remember the unsolved case in the Andes Valley 6 years ago?" Sitting in the carriage, the magical brain device resting on his lap, Phil was bewildered by this incoherent message. "Son of Flame, of course, why do you suddenly ask this? I wasn't there back then, and I only heard about it afterwards." The expedition, jointly led by the Union and the Alliance of Wizarding Kingdoms, to explore the ancient ruins near the Andes Valley, was suddenly attacked by a group of mysterious individuals upon its return. Because the expedition consisted mostly of research spellcasters, and the operation was kept secret within the Union, they were short on combat retainers and bloodline warriors. They were completely outnumbered by the attackers, who outnumbered them by several orders of magnitude. Ultimately, they were nearly annihilated, with only a few apprentice mages and student spellcasters who were repatriated mid-transgression escaping. While most spellcasters believed this was simply another targeted attack by the Church's Divine Punishment faction, the investigation revealed traces of spellcasting attacks within the attackers, not only using traditional Church tactics but also possessing the techniques of spellcasters themselves. Clearly, even wizarding families close to the Church would not completely defect and cooperate with the Church in attacking their fellow spellcasters. After years of debate and a perfunctory investigation, the incident was ultimately dismissed as a private vendetta between wizarding families, and gradually became an open cold case. Stormwalker, a witness to this incident, a dear friend we thought was tragically dead, has suddenly returned to life and sought us out. Do you want to know the truth? We need your help, Flameson. What help? I'm not one of those hounds the Union keeps in captivity. I can't help you solve this cold case from years ago. Besides, what good would I gain from doing it? Stormwalker, let me put it another way. Are you interested in joining us to sneak into the home of a church priest with a disgusting pedophilia habit and teach this hypocritical, sanctimonious person a lesson? And, by the way, investigate any insider information he may have about his involvement in this case. Flameson, these hypocritical church bastards. All right. I agree to join, but how can I cooperate with you? Matthews Willie looked at the message on the crystal screen, his lips curled up slightly, and he quickly typed a reply. Stormson, we'll talk when we meet. Chapter 221 Extraordinary Secret War, end of this volume. Shortly after the sun set over the mountains, curfews began to sound throughout Black Rock City. This nighttime curfew only applied to civilians, not the numerous spellcasters and church inquisitors residing there. With a demonic offensive weakening, even ordinary nobles and wealthy merchants could purchase passes to roam freely after curfew. The Church of Radiance's primary stronghold within Black Rock City was the diocese, home to the Black Rock Cathedral. This, along with the Vatican Barracks, where the inquisitors were stationed, separated the spellcaster-heavy Mage district by a central street, seemingly maintaining a separate presence. Furthermore, the church established several small churches in the market district, home to taverns and shops, the administrative district housing the Allied Forces headquarters, and the civilian-populated Lower Street and City Gate districts, providing space for daily prayer and weekly worship services for the city's vast congregation. High Priest Tyrion Wright served as the chief priest of Lower Street Church within Blackstone City. He led the priests and deacons of the church, spreading the faith and glory of the God of Light to the people of the area. It was a highly coveted position. If it weren't for Tyrion's close confidant of Cardinal Franklin of Blackstone Cathedral, he wouldn't have had access to the city's most populous civilian areas. Furthermore, he wouldn't have to leave the city to assist the Inquisitors in their daily battles against the demons, making it a truly comfortable retreat. Tyrion, after all, was already approaching 60 years old. A priest like him, unlike the more offensively skilled combat priests of the Curia, would not have been eligible for high-ranking positions. It was only through decades of strategic maneuvering that he successfully climbed the ranks of Cardinal Franklin. Lord Tyrion, the children Baron Porter sent have been sent to the Archbishop, as you requested, the deacon reported softly, leaning close to his ear. Tyrion nodded in satisfaction. He had personally selected the fair-skinned and handsome children, and they would surely please Bishop Franklin. It is an honor for these children to meet His Eminence the Archbishop in person, to listen to his teachings and prayers. May the glory of our Lord shine upon them forever. The deacon placed his hands on his chest in greeting, then added quietly, the child named Loda has been sent to your annex beforehand. With that, he stepped back a few steps and left the study. Tyrion chuckled faintly, rising from the soft sofa and pouring himself a glass of ruby-clear, pure wine. This was the holy blood wine, supplied exclusively to the Black Rock Diocese by the church's winery. Ordinary priests and inquisitors were not entitled to enjoy it freely, and certainly not a high priest of Tyrion's rank. Aside from his regular duties to His Eminence the Bishop of Blackstone Cathedral, he rarely left his diocese, partly because he had no combat missions and partly because he was content to enjoy himself. As long as the Vatican remained in Blackstone City, competing with the Union, his church would always be visited by nobles and wealthy merchants. Those seeking to establish their own power and assets in the Filmoon Mountains and Blackstone City could turn to the church for assistance, far more convenient than dealing with those unworldly wizards. Tyrion Wright was not a combat priest of the ascetic order. So he did not reside in the cathedral on a daily basis, instead maintaining a comfortable residence nearby. However, when he felt the urge to relax and enjoy himself, he preferred to retreat to a secluded compound far from the cathedral. It seemed that by staying away from the cathedral, he could escape the gaze of his deity and alleviate the guilt and shame he felt for indulging his desires. On the carriage that left the church for the courtyard, the personal deacon whispered to him at the right time, "My lord, about a matter of Baron Potter's fiefdom, how should we deal with and respond?" Tyrion leaned back on the seat in the carriage, squinted his eyes and thought for a while, recalling the valuable offerings that Baron Potter had sent him during this period. He slowed down and said, "The Baron's temporary tax increase due to poor harvests should not have been something we should have intervened in, but since believers are involved, then we have no choice but to come forward to help him out. These low-ranking nobles, whose fiefdoms and property are not rich, are always so short-sighted and greedy. They stare at the meager profits produced from their own land all day long, and will find ways to make up for the slightest loss from other places. Last winter's snowstorm in the western border delayed spring plowing, leaving most of the lesser nobles facing harvest failures and tenant farmers refusing to pay rent. Even at this moment, the nobles had to impose temporary tax hikes to offset the losses on their own private lands. It would have been fine if it were just ordinary untouchables gathering to cause unrest, but within Baron Porter's fiefdom, several small landowners, former knights, took the lead in resisting the taxes, stoking a furor that seemed uncontrollable. Send a team of Inquisition knights to speak privately with our Lord's faithful knights. Coordinate with the local priests and ministers to mediate, ensuring they are not dragged into open conflict with the nobles by the common people. Extreme measures may be employed if necessary." As they spoke, they quickly reached a villa on Lower Street. The young deacon conscientiously returned to his own room, not disturbing the high priest's private relaxation. After showering and changing with the help of his attendant, Tyrion arrived at the luxurious master bedroom suite on the second floor. Opening the door, he saw a boy standing by the sofa in the living room. He was wearing pure white priest robes, with a hemp rope tied around his waist, signifying his ascetic status. He looked tremblingly at the high priest who had entered. The boy had pure black hair that curled slightly, and a fair and handsome face. The priest robes on him were obviously not well-fitting, and were slightly too loose. Tyrion narrowed his eyes, walked to the sofa and sat down, then asked in a gentle voice, "Child, how old are you this year?" The boy replied timidly, "Your Excellency, I just turned 13, haha. Children nowadays develop so fast physically. They grow so tall at such a young age." The high priest sighed with a smile and waved to the boy, "Come here, sit at my feet, and chat with me." A trace of imperceptible disgust flashed in the boy's eyes, but he still walked to Tyrion's side and sat cross-legged on the carpet in front of the sofa, resisting the other's skinny palm like a chicken claw, slowly stroking the thick curly hair on his head. "Child, where do you live? Which priest baptized you?" The boy's voice was clear, but his tone was a little confused. "Sir, I have not been baptized, and my parents are not believers. We did not live in the parish in the past." The old priest paused and slowly moved his hand away from the boy's head. An inaudible chuckle seemed to come from his throat, with a hint of excitement. "Really? You and your family have never been blessed by the glory of our Lord? Tisk tisk tisk, it's such a pity." He stood up, took out two things from the bookcase in the living room, turned around and looked at the boy sitting cross-legged on the carpet. "Then, let me complete the missionary baptism ceremony for you." The boy saw that he was holding a thick church book in one hand and a wooden ruler in the other hand. "Recite the Holy Scriptures with me, and feel the glory and grace of our Lord. But be careful. If you mispronounce a word, you will be punished with the ruler. Do you understand?" He stepped forward and placed a long ruler against the hemp rope around the boy's waist. He chuckled and said, "Now, you must remove your robe and bare yourself before our Lord. Do not resist." The boy's mouth twitched, and he stood up and stepped back repeatedly, shaking his head like a rattle. Tyrion's previously gentle demeanor suddenly changed. His face turned cold and his voice was deep. "Be obedient, and do not use force. If you refuse to obey, I will send you to the basement later. HMPH, you will suffer more." As he spoke, Tyrion loosened the belt of his nightgown, revealing his thin, old body. He slowly approached the boy huddled in the corner. Suddenly, a rhythmic knock on the living room door interrupted his exhilarating game of coercion. He frowned and shouted angrily, "Who is it? Did I tell you not to disturb me?" A waiter replied, "Lord Tyrion, I've brought you some holy blood wine and hot tea to help you sleep." The high priest hurriedly tied the belt of his nightgown and muttered to the door, "I don't remember asking you to bring me any wine." He opened the door only to be greeted by a stranger. He wasn't wearing waiter's clothes, and in his hands, he held no wine, but a shimmering, crystalline gem. This immediately captivated Tyrion's attention. The Soul Stone. Oh no. Tyrion only had time to think this before he sank into trance. He stumbled a few steps and fell to the ground, watching helplessly as the stranger sidled into the room and quietly closed the door. The man ignored the fallen priest, not even a glance at the boy cowering in the corner. Instead, he quickly walked to the window and flung open the shutters. A sudden gust of wind swept a figure into the room. The man holding the soul stone then slowly walked over to Tyrion and squatted. He hovered the gem before his eyes, chuckled, and said, "Good evening, Sir Tyrion. We apologize for interrupting your nighttime missionary activities." Tyrion forced himself to concentrate, but found his body gradually becoming cold and stiff. It felt like a piece of ice was stuffed into his throat, making it extremely difficult for him to even speak. You are spellcasters? Why, you attack me." "Was it the Union?" instructed. Another black-robed man who was swept into the room by the strong wind sneered. "Union? Spellcaster? No. The church won't find any traces of attack by a spellcaster in your room. After your soul is searched by the soul stone, you will only become an idiot old man who can't even control your excretion. You may choke to death in your own vomit before being discovered at dawn." Tyrion's eyes flashed with panic. An angry word squeezed out of his throat again. Damn evil wizards. You actually dare to openly attack high-level priests of the church in Black Rock City, and use the soul stone that even the Union has banned without authorization. It's a blasphemy." The man squatting beside him curled his lips, put his fingers together and pressed against his eyebrows, and began to recite the spell quickly and silently, staring into Tyrion's eyes, his pupils quickly turning into a rapidly spinning vortex. Tyrion trembled violently, his eyes rolled back, and white foam began to pour out of his mouth and nose uncontrollably. In this moment of life and death, he finally controlled his stiff fingers and pressed hard on a tiny spike on the ring, piercing the rough pad of his finger. A blazing white light suddenly flew from the ring, striking the mysterious man almost face to face. After a buzzing sound, the illusory shield that had suddenly appeared around the man shattered, forcing him to interrupt his spell and step back. The lights in the room dimmed, and the darkness in the corner in front of the door suddenly began to stir as if alive. The mysterious figure standing by the window waved a wind blade, which flew towards the dark corner. The wind blade disappeared silently, stirring the darkness to spread rapidly. A figure suddenly emerged from the creeping and spreading darkness, as if it had been separated from the darkness, suddenly emerging and converging without warning. A figure stooped, leaving a trail of shadow behind. Wielding a razor-sharp dagger, it thrust fiercely at the throat of the black-clad man beside Tyrion. With terrifying speed, he instantly covered a distance of less than 5 meters, closing in on his attacker. With a single thrust, the dagger pierced the man's throat with unerring precision. The figure didn't feel the tip of the sword piercing his skin, nor did he see the sudden gush of blood. Instead, he sensed a sudden surge of stagnant magical energy. The man struck by the dagger shattered like a glass mirror, shattering into several pieces. Intermediate-level arcane magic, mirror image defense. 2 more wind blades flew straight towards the figure in the darkness, forcing him to roll and dodge. Forced out of the dense darkness, his true form emerged, the young acolyte who had attended Tyrion. A high-ranking knight of the Inquisition, awakened by the dark bloodline, lurks beside a church priest who's not even a combat priest. Haha, how amusing, a man, whose figure shattered like a mirror before reappearing in a corner of the room, scoffed. Matthias, standing by the window, remained silent, manipulating the wind blades he unleashed, slashing at his target, gradually shrinking the space his opponent had to dodge, and gradually retreating back into the corner. The young deacon frowned slightly, swung out 3 identical short blades from his waist, and quickly extinguished a few candles in the room. His body quickly faded into the darkness, attempting to blend back into the darkness. Matthias, with a sudden thought, ceased manipulating the wind blades. He clasped his hands together and thrust them forward, sending a wave of icy wind sweeping through the room. It was the intermediate elemental magic breath of frigid cold. The young deacon, who had just faded into the darkness, stumbled back into existence. The wind and waves whipped against his stiffening body, slowing his movements as if he were stuck in a quagmire. Unable to reach these spellcasters, he couldn't use the Darkblood's most powerful ability, annihilation. It seemed he had no choice but to abandon High Priest Tyrion and find a way to escape the 2 high-ranking spellcasters on his own, quickly reaching Blackstone Cathedral to warn the Archbishop. Struggling to maintain his dark form, he raised his hand and crushed a brilliant amulet hanging from his neck. A soft, holy light descended from the heavens, completely enveloping him, briefly regaining consciousness. But the holy light also repelled his dark blood, and a fierce burning sensation spread through his skin. He endured the pain, rolling repeatedly toward the window, his chance of escape within reach. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his waist, and he turned back in shock. The young boy, who had fainted and slumped against the wall by the window, had suddenly awakened. With a smirk, he thrust a gleaming dagger into his waist, twisting it cruelly as they locked gazes. The young deacon finally lost control, letting out a piercing howl. He released his dagger and pressed his palms with difficulty towards the boy's neck, intending to use his bloodline gift of annihilation to end the despicable backstabber. But before his body could make contact, the boy's hands, holding the dagger at his waist, suddenly erupted in a blinding burst of lightning. Silver-white lightning burst and exploded, like tangible plasma coursing through his body. Before he could utter a final scream, his entire body suddenly exploded, charred and withered flesh shattering to the ground, without a single drop of blood splattering. The plasma seemed to have no end in sight. Without the support of flesh and blood, it spread rapidly throughout the room, transforming the luxuriously decorated bedroom into a terrifying battlefield of electricity and fire. The 2 fellow spellcasters cast spells, applying powerful defensive spells, but they couldn't withstand the violent ranged attack of the lightning. Their bodies, their hair charred black, stood on end, and they couldn't help but curse. The young boy's bones crackled, and his body rapidly deformed, twisted, and expanded, returning to its original, tall and muscular form. It was the high-level elemental mage, Phil Holden. He tugged at his ill-fitting priest robes and chuckled awkwardly, "Damn. This is my first time using this spell. I couldn't control the power and range. I'm so sorry." Stormwalker Matthews, his face charred black, twitched his lips. He hesitated, pulling a parchment scroll from his pocket and tossing it to his companion, who had initially disguised himself as a waiter, instructing him to quickly prepare the scene. Phil Holden grabbed the broken hemp rope belt on his robe, pointed at the high-ranking priest Tyrion White who was lying on the ground and had lost his life after being affected by the magic, and muttered dissatisfiedly, "Can't you find me a pair of pants first? I don't understand. You can obviously assassinate this guy directly, but you have to make me disguise myself, and such a disgusting identity." Matthews rolled his eyes in annoyance. "If not, how can we lure out the Dark Knight lurking beside him? If you hadn't failed to control the power of the magic, we could have saved Tyrion's life and forced the inside truth of the Duncan case from his mouth. Now everything is messed up." Phil Holden smiled embarrassedly, scratched his head, and watched Matthew's companion pierce Tyrion White's chest with a sharp knife, and dip the blood that had not yet cooled down to smear on the wall. "Is this the disguise you came up with? What's the point of this cryptic talisman?" Matthews leaned over to Fair and whispered, "Through Mr. Kilthuzad's introduction, I obtained a demon summoning ritual pattern from Mr. Mindhunter. With some camouflage at the scene, we can redirect the church's investigation to the demon sacrifice they encountered not long ago in the Evil Moon Mine." Phil was stunned, then asked in disbelief, "What? How could Mr. Kilthuzad be connected to demonic sacrifice? Is that forum member named Mindhunter actually a demonic cultist?" As the blood-drawn magic circle gradually took shape, a thick sulphurous scent began to fill the air, mingled with a strange wheezing sound. Something alive seemed to be slowly moving in the darkness, sending a chill down one's spine. The lingering magical energy of various spells in the room quickly dissipated, leaving only the priest's corpse, a blade lodged in his chest, and the charred remains of the bloodline knights scattered across the ground. Chapter 222 Deep Cooperation. In the magical capital of Alair, within the joint meeting hall atop the floating tower in the Sky region, three legendary chiefs, usually rarely involved in the internal affairs of the Federation, sat together for the first time around a quaint round table. This was a custom established since the Federation's founding a century ago. When the Federation faced important decisions, the three chiefs would attend the joint meeting, summoning the heads of numerous departments, including the Ministry of Magical Affairs, the Ministry of War, the Ministry of External Affairs, and the Academic Review Department. Regardless of the outcome, First Chief, Chemo Salas, held the final veto. But this time, unlike in the past, each of the three chiefs held the delicate brass alchemical instrument before them. The officials from various Federation departments seated on the periphery were completely bewildered, completely unsure of what was going on. However, no one dared to question the chiefs, so they remained at their full attention. Frank Spellshield McCollin sat at the Ministry of Magical Affairs table, suppressing his overflowing joy. Due to his position and rank, he wasn't originally eligible to represent the ministry at the joint meeting. But Frank was well aware that the forum's codename, Spellshield, brought him value and status. As one of the second in command to join the Spellcaster Forum, in addition to the original members, Frank undoubtedly became a core member representing the interests of the Federation. Therefore, Lord Salas personally selected him for this crucial joint meeting. This was a truly practical negotiation for deep cooperation between the Federation and the Spellcaster Forum and the ancient, mysterious entity behind it. It was rumored that the three chief ministers had already held several private discussions with MR Observer Neumann, with the primary goal of the collaboration being to obtain the anti-magic artifacts offered by the Forum. Spellshield immediately thought of his two collateral relatives, the twin Quinn brothers. Upon learning he was eligible to participate in the cooperation negotiations, they had rushed to his house to plead with him, seeking to secure opportunities and benefits for the Exploration Society in the details of the negotiation. These two, completely unsophisticated, had no understanding of political tactics. This so-called joint negotiation was merely a formality. The true intentions of the cooperation and the details of the exchange of benefits had likely already been privately negotiated between the three chief ministers and Mr. Turing and Mr. Neumann, leaving no room for anyone else to interfere. Fran then reflected on how his current status was entirely due to the imprudent invitations of the brothers Afri and Ed, who had accidentally allowed him to become a member of the Spellcaster Forum. He truly needed to repay this favor. At the head of the round table, Scorching Lord Chemo Salas's narrowed eyes suddenly opened. He bent his fingers and tapped the tabletop 3 times, gently, and the whispers in the conference room immediately ceased. "We've gathered you all today to discuss the topic of in-depth cooperation between the Federation and, due to confidentiality requirements of the partnering organization, we will not be disclosing specific details internally for now. You should all understand that they hold what we most desperately need." He paused, glanced around, and slowly continued, "This will free the Federation from the Church's obstruction and the Seven Kingdoms Wizarding Alliance's constraints, enabling it to independently fight the demon invasion and completely reverse public opinion, a transcendental weapon." These words exploded in the conference room like a massive alchemical bomb, instantly dissolving the once solemn and unified atmosphere into chaos. Surprise, suspicion, excitement, and disbelief mingled on everyone's face. Some tentatively cast a pleading glance at the other two chiefs, seeking a glimmer of reassurance from their expressions, only to find that Lord Dawson was looking upwards, not meeting their gaze, while Lord Gallagher had his eyes closed, a trance-like expression. Gould, the combat director who was wearing a classical black wizard robe, finally couldn't bear it any longer. He stood up suddenly and asked excitedly, "Your Excellency Chief, please forgive me for being frank. There are many members in the Federation who come from the Seven Wizarding Kingdoms. Of course, there are also some members who have church beliefs. But do you mean to completely push the Federation to the opposite side of all the forces in the southern border, a supernatural weapon that can allow the Federation to independently resist the invasion of the demons? Haha, am I hallucinating?" His wording was a bit rude, causing many spellcasters present to frown, but no one spoke to scold them, because they didn't dare to believe what the chief said. Seraph smiled faintly, a smile tinged with an inexplicable meaning. He raised his hand gently, signaling silence. He continued, "You didn't hear this. I'll reveal the truth to everyone. You can judge for yourselves the value of this partnership to the Federation." He tapped the table again, and the eerie, pupilless face of Tarling Enzo suddenly appeared from the hall's dome. It opened its mouth and released a crystalline image stone, which slowly hovered above the round table in the center of the conference hall. The image stone automatically activated, replaying Chief Gallagher's secret weapon experiments with captive demons in Blackstone City. The flashbacks were brief. After witnessing the demon captives' bodies instantly decay and disintegrate after being struck by the strange artifact, everyone finally stood up, their eyes widening. Annihilation? This magic weapon simulates the innate ability of the dark bloodline. No. This is more like the flesh and blood disintegration technique. But why can it also have the effect of physical decay? The secret is above. This is a magic weapon that solidifies the high-level curse technique. A legendary magic weapon, Dawson sneered and said dimly, "Look, the Federation has been established for more than 100 years, and our spellcaster's vision and understanding of new things are still in such a conservative period." He has always spoken sharply and mercilessly. The people in the conference hall have long been accustomed to it, and no one showed any anger. This is an alchemical weapon. Special attack capabilities are solidified with magical inscriptions, and it is specially developed for the physique and physical characteristics of the demons. The head of the research department quickly stepped forward, bent over to the chief's round table, and said in surprise with wide eyes, "So, we have obtained the finished product of this alchemical weapon? Can we start imitating it, Gould?" The head of the combat department snorted and frowned. "How many can you imitate? Enough to equip the most elite high-level spellcaster regiment of the Mage Alliance? That's a full 150 high-level combat mages. If we could equip each of them with such a powerful high-level weapon, why would we have to wait until today?" The Mage Alliance, composed of the Federation and the Wizard Kingdom, is not without equipment of standard magic weapons, but even with the support of a huge magic weapon manufacturing organization like the Alchemical Exploration Society, it is still difficult for them to gain an overwhelming advantage on the battlefield. After all, no matter how superior a standard magical weapon is, it still requires the caster to utilize their own stored mana, combined with spells to launch an attack. When mana is depleted, the magic amplification provided by the weapon is meaningless, dealing less damage than a common sword. Members of high-level spellcasting chapters often disdain the use of standard magical weapons. These cheap, mass-produced, low-level amplification weapons are far inferior to custom-made mid to high-level magical weapons, making them a completely useless choice. Salas curled his lips, glancing sideways with a subtle glance at Fran McCollin, the shield, who was now seated at the periphery. He couldn't help but shudder. "The chief is hinting that it's my turn." He immediately stood up and said loudly to the arguing crowd, "Everyone, we have obtained the finished product of this anti-magic weapon from our collaborator, and secretly commissioned the chief alchemist of the Alchemy Exploration Society to successfully complete the imitation." The air at the scene suddenly froze. "Then why are we still discussing cooperation matters with him? Isn't the thing already in hand?" "Humph. The other party underestimates the ability of the Federation, doesn't it? They hand over such an important finished weapon directly to us. Where does they get the confidence to think that we are not capable of imitating it? 300 pieces. No, as long as we can create 150 such weapons, our high-level spellcaster regiment will be invincible on the supply front of the demon army. Gallagher, who always wears a black robe, snorted coldly, interrupting the excited discussions in the venue. Arrogant. Blind. Ignorant. The use of this weapon cannot be achieved by simply imitating it. Its operating principle is similar to that of a crossbow. It needs to be equipped with ammunition like arrows to stimulate the attack effect. And we can't imitate the so-called ammunition at all. We can't even crack its manufacturing formula. This is the greatest confidence of our partners in negotiating with us. He stood up and pulled out a strangely shaped silver metal short staff from the box handed to him by the waiter. He raised his hand in front of everyone and said in a deep voice, "Moreover, the cooperation intention we want to reach is not just as simple as using this anti-magic weapon to equip a high-level spellcaster regiment. As long as they have the magic ammunition continuously provided by their partners, spellcasters of any level can manipulate this weapon to attack the enemy. Even the most useless low-level research mage can easily kill a powerful demon-enhanced warrior." Gallagher looked around the hall and finally set his gaze on his two chief colleagues. He glanced at them and nodded slightly, and then said something astonishing that made the scene immediately silent. "Furthermore, this isn't a weapon that only spellcasters are qualified to wield. Even if it were given to an ordinary mortal soldier, as long as he underwent simple shooting and aiming training, he could completely replace the spellcaster and confront the demon soldiers head-on on the battlefield." Chapter 223 Agent. What? High-level magical weapons that ordinary people can use. Mortals can even face demon soldiers head-on? They don't even require awakened bloodline knights or extraordinary spellcasters to wield. Magical weapons that can be mass-produced like ordinary swords, bows, and arrows. Everyone in the venue was stunned and confused by the black-robed chief's words, seemingly unable to believe what they had just heard. The director of the Ministry of Magical Affairs suddenly stood up, swaying slightly. He barely managed to hold on to the back of his chair before asking in a trembling voice, "Your Excellency, this magical weapon, will it also inflict the same damage on the caster?" After a moment's silence, Sarath's deep voice echoed through the hall. "No, the magical arrows released from this weapon only target demons. We've repeatedly verified this with experimental receptors of other races and creatures, and it doesn't cause any harm, including humans, of course." A sigh echoed throughout the meeting room, and almost everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The Director of Magical Affairs, feeling completely exhausted, sank back into his chair, his pale face dripping with sweat. Gould, the head of the combat department, flashed an expression of ecstasy and interjected in disbelief, "Your Excellency, if you say so, this anti-magic weapon can be mass-produced. As long as our partners continue to provide sufficient ammunition, we can equip tens of thousands of spellcasters and civilian soldiers, providing an overwhelming advantage in the fight against the demons." Putting aside the armed forces of the Church of Light in the Seven Wizard Kingdoms, the Federation's permanent spellcasting force stationed in Blackstone City in the Evil Moon Mountains already numbered over 2,000, the majority of whom were experienced mid-level combat mages, including over 100 high-level spellcasters. Add to that the numerous ordinary wizard retainers and auxiliary soldiers, as well as the rotating casters dispatched annually from the Southern Kingdoms, and the total number approached 5,000. If they could truly equip all of these individuals with anti-magic weapons, the Federation might truly be able to completely break free from the constraints of the Wizard Coalition and no longer need to struggle to maintain a shaky veneer of alliance with the Church. They could single-handedly withstand the relentless demonic onslaught. The high-level spellcasters from the combat division attending the joint meeting were now overwhelmed with joy, huddled together in whispers, and began to discuss various details about how to implement the counterattack. The elderly director of the Academic Review Department, however, remained remarkably calm. His gaze blazed at the three heads of the round table, and hesitantly asked, "So, what's the price we'll have to pay for this?" Although the three heads were tight-lipped about the identities of their partners, no one present was foolish. Anyone who could easily hand over such powerful, transcendental magical weapons to the Federation and offer cooperation could certainly not be one of the familiar continental powers. Whether it was the cave dwarves, the elves, or the sea people, who had always kept their distance from each other, they simply didn't have the strength to do so. The other party must be one of those secretive ancient races or alien races from the warp, who, through some special means, have reached an invitation to cooperate with the three legendary chiefs. Some in the meeting hall even began to vaguely associate the identity of the partner with a demonic race from another dimension. What is their purpose? What price do they want? When the survival of a race is at stake, there's no such thing as unprovoked help or goodwill. Knowledge, resources, money, allies, as long as it aligns with the principle of value exchange, they'll accept anything, Chief Dawson replied succinctly. Chief Sereth explained gently, based on the principle of equal exchange, we don't need to worry about the sincerity of the partner. Their demands are completely reasonable, and we can afford them. He then raised his hand and asked the magical assistants in the meeting hall to distribute the pre-copied and printed documents to the attendees, urging them to read them carefully. This isn't a simple two-way collaboration. Numerous factions are involved. Dawson, Gallagher, and I agree on this matter. The more factions we can tie to our ship, the greater the benefits we'll see. Everyone picked up the distributed documents and began to read them word for word, only then realizing the complexity of this collaboration and the numerous races and factions involved. The cryptids and high elves would bear the brunt of the responsibility, providing the magical materials for the mass production of anti-magic weapons. The procurement costs would be fully covered by the Federation, freeing them from the profit squeeze they'd experienced in the past. The manufacture of anti-magic weapons would be entrusted entirely to the official workshops of the alchemical quest. They would only need to provide experienced alchemists and apprentices to ensure the weaponry's manufacture, assembly, and enchantment. The crucial task of weapon and ammunition production, however, was unexpectedly entrusted to recently recognized magical genius, Kilthuzid, and his secret alchemical laboratory. What does this mean? The magical weapons and ammunition that we cannot imitate and replicate are now being manufactured by an independent spellcaster who hasn't even revealed his true identity to the public? Did the partner hand over the secret of the formula to him? On what basis? The head of the research department stood up angrily and demanded, who is this Kilthuzid? What is the background of the organization behind him? Can it be more powerful than the Spellcasters Union? Why should the production of the most important ammunition be handed over to him? Magic Shield friend McCollum was sitting next to him. He wiped the saliva on the back of his hand with a little disgust and couldn't help but say, what if this is the condition required by the partner? Do we just refuse? Or is it that your research department has more advanced technology than the Exploration Society, and can directly replicate weapons and ammunition without them? The head of the research department was choked and speechless. After returning to his seat, he glared at Fran angrily, wishing he could give him an arcane blast on the spot to vent his anger. But there was some truth to his words. In this multi-party collaboration, it appeared the High Elves and Dwarves reaped the benefits of raw material exports. The Alchemical Quest Society mastered the technology for weapon imitation and manufacturing. And the forces behind the unidentified independent spellcaster obtained the formula for the most valuable magical ammunition. What about the Federation? Not only did it have to shoulder all the material costs for weapon manufacturing, it also had to pay the Quest Society's outsourcing costs. Even the most important magical weapons and ammunition were firmly in the hands of others. To shed the burden of the state and conservative wizarding families of the Seven Kingdoms, to break free from the superficial alliance of the Church of Light, to independently lead the Southern Kingdoms against the demonic invasion, was such a price worth paying? It's worth it. Of course it's worth it. Chief Dawson and Gallagher's voices echoed simultaneously in the council hall, silencing the cacophony of whispers and discussions. As long as we can completely drive the demons out of the Evil Moon Mountains and push the front line of the war between the two races to the wasteland north of the Divine Spine Mountains, everyone, think about the rich magic stone mineral resources hidden in the Evil Moon Mountains, as well as the rare magical plants and magical beast populations everywhere. Don't you understand the value of them? And everyone, don't forget that Mr. Kilthuzid, the only agent chosen by the Cooperation Party, is also a member of the human race. He will never betray his race and harm the interests of the human race in the southern border. Next, let's start voting in turn according to the Federation's practice of more than 100 years. The three chiefs stood up first, raised their left hands with solemn expressions, and looked around. Spell Shield friend McCollum immediately stood up, raised his hand, and said solemnly, agree. Several spellcasters from the Affairs Department followed suit, raising their hands and saying in unison, agree. The Combat Department, led by Director Gould, all rose and raised their hands, agree. The first chairman of the Academic Review Committee, the oldest spellcaster present and a leader of the conservative faction within the Union, couldn't help but close his eyes and sigh, "Aren't we making a deal with the devil?" More than half of the people in the conference hall rose and raised their hands in agreement. A strange, twisted expression crossed the enormous, pupilless face of Tarling Enzo, who had been silently hovering in the hall's dome. Then, opening his deep, profound mouth, he released a scroll of ancient parchment, which slowly floated down to the round table. Oathkeeper, many of the older spellcasters, recognizing the origin of the parchment, sighed softly. This scroll was created over 100 years ago, at the founding of the Union, by the first chief of legendary rank. 5 copies were created, and this is the final one. The previous 4 copies were used to sign peace treaties with the cave dwarves, high elves, and sea folk. The last use, 50 years ago, was to sign an offensive and defensive alliance with the Church of Radiance, a settlement aimed at reconciling the conflict and jointly resisting the demonic invasion. Unexpectedly, the final oath-keeping curse would now be used to sign a cooperation agreement where even the identities of the parties involved must remain confidential. The implication is clear. It also indicates that the partners are not of the same kind, but rather a mysterious and unknown race. The function of this ancient scroll is simple. Simply write the terms of the agreement on it, then have the allies smear it with a drop of blood, and the oath will automatically be established. It's said that the crafting of this oath-keeping scroll derives from an ancient curse sworn during the Dragon Age millennia ago, used by the dragon race to enslave the races of the continent. Breaking this oath will result in an irreversible curse. The higher the level of transcendental status within the clan, the greater the backlash, starting with the signer. In severe cases, it could even affect their own descendants. After the 3 leaders of the Union sign, the parchment scroll will be delivered directly to the dungeon city of Breath of the Southern Hills and to the Golden Forest of Lorraine in the east. Finally, it will be transported directly via the ley line to the forum's agent, Kilthuzid, who will provide the final confirmation and signature. This is the role of a mediating agent independent of the various factions. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224 Ammunition Order. By the time Harvey retrieved the oath-keeping curse from the Magic Network teleportation array, a full 2 weeks had passed. Apparently, the Federation, the dwarves, and the elves must have gone through several intense internal discussions and deliberations before finally reaching a consensus on this special covenant. The oath-keeping curse has existed since ancient times, as Dallin picked up the ancient sheepskin scroll with great interest and examined it carefully. But at that time, this thing was used by the Dragon Clan to enslave other intelligent races. The curse power contained in it was so strong that even legendary transcendents could not completely resist it. Harvey asked curiously, "This contract scroll should be a replica, right? Can the curse effect it exerts be comparable to those original authentic ones from the Dragon era?" As Dallin chuckled and shook his head, saying disdainfully, "Unless the person who made this scroll can still obtain real dragon blood, of course, as a second best option, using the blood of high-level vampires of my clan can be used as a substitute, but after observing the magic fluctuations and the content of the spell attached to it, I'm afraid that at most it used the blood of some sub-dragon monsters, and it might not even achieve half of the original effect." Despite Dallin's absolute confidence in the contract's effectiveness, Harvey still felt a sense of uncertainty. It couldn't compare to the ordinary magical contracts he'd signed with Reiner, which at best served as a simple lie detection and authenticity check. The Oathkeeper curse was a simplified version of the ancient slavery curse, possessing a truly powerful binding power at the soul level. Any carelessness could result in severe repercussions. Harvey wasn't one of the 3 legendary leaders of the Union, and he simply couldn't afford the risks involved. He then recalled the 2 unhatched soul puppet eggs he'd left on the Spirit Anchor beach. They were the result of the terrifying bloody rifts that had appeared in his body within the Spirit Anchor after the magic pattern mutated. Theoretically, the resulting puppet bodies had no blood connection to him, merely empty shells housing his spiritual power and soul. With this in mind, Harvey decided to conduct a simple experiment using the 2 puppet bodies to test whether they could replace his original form and fulfill the so-called oath-keeping curse. After quickly entering a spiritual anchor through guided meditation, Harvey unexpectedly discovered that the half of a church priest's soul projection that he had devoured while helping 3 forum members dissolve 2 fused magic patterns within the magic network had been transformed into a transparent egg follicle on the mysterious beach, floating ashore. Curiously picking it up and examining it, Harvey was disappointed to discover that the egg follicle contained a deformed embryo with missing limbs. It seemed that after being devoured, the incomplete soul projection or magic pattern could not be transformed into a healthy puppet for his parasitic spirit, rendering the deformed embryo completely useless. With a wry smile, Harvey discarded the discarded egg follicle to the side. He then refocused his mental energy to quickly catalyze the remaining egg into full shape, then carried him back to the real world through the connected magic network teleportation array. The puppet, now in a state of separation, was incredibly agile. Upon returning to the lab, it grabbed a thin blanket and covered itself with it. Then, it deftly collaborated with Harvey on several simple lab procedures, including preparation, blood drawing, hemolysis, and blood tests. Harvey picked up the clearly incompatible blood test tube and gently swirled the pale red liquid. He exchanged a tacit glance with the puppet, his lips curling up as he chuckled softly. It seems that the puppet's flesh and blood body will not be connected to the main body, but if the body carries the main body's soul in a state of separation to sign the ancient contract, will the covenant take effect? The puppet Harvey analyzed carefully. If what Asdalen said is correct, the contract itself uses the effect of restraining the soul but backfiring on the flesh and blood to achieve its effectiveness, then the bug that exists in it can be completely exploited by us. The main body. Harvey smiled slightly, took the oath-keeping curse rolled up in parchment, and gently handed it to the puppet's hand. Then give it a try. Anyway, the worst result is that the contract will eventually be fed back to the main body. The chief of the Federation has signed it, and I don't have to be shy. Without any hesitation, the puppet immediately used a syringe to draw a small amount of blood, and smeared it on the surface covered with dark spell patterns according to the agreement on the parchment scroll. The faint incantations, upon contact with the blood, instantly began to wriggle rapidly, as if imbued with life. The Nemetot patterns first formed a line of letters that spelled out the name of a person, Harvey Floyd. But then, as if correcting an error, they quickly melted away, twisting and turning again to form the nameless, fictitious codename of Cthulhu. This lasted for less than half a minute before slowly twisting again, as if trying to uncover a deeper essence of the blood donor. Harvey's eyes narrowed, horrified to see that the twisting and shifting incantations on the ancient scroll were slowly forming familiar glyphs. Chinese characters. They were trying to trace the true name of the contract's signer. The true name of Harvey, the time traveler, in his previous life. But the name, halfway through its struggle, seemed to be blocked by some unknown entity, and was quickly scrambled again, scattered miserably across the parchment scroll, unable to reassemble for a long time. A full 10 minutes passed before the rune seemed to regain a modicum of vitality, feebly gathering together and distorting to form Cthulhu, Harvey's anonymous code name. The handwriting looked unusually sloppy, like an illiterate child's forced imitation. Harvey wiped the sweat from his forehead and breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that once again, the unknown peculiarities of his time traveler identity had narrowly avoided exposure. He wondered if it was the mutated runes or the blocking effect of the mind anchor that had helped. After successfully completing this ancient contract by exploiting a bug, Harvey finally calmed down and began to carefully consider the multi-party collaboration with the Union, the Cryptids, and the High Elves. According to the subtle hints he had previously given to them on the Spellcaster Forum, using the identity of Observer Neumann. The fictitious organization led by Administrator Turing and Observer Neumann was merely providing technology and samples for the manufacture of anti-magic weapons. As the designated real-world agent, Harvey only needed to mass-produce weapons and ammunition using the magical materials provided by the Forum. After all, he claimed that the materials for making magical ammunition were only accessible to the Forum, and that no real-world equivalents could be found. Harvey had no concerns about being exposed or directly verified. The magical ammunition needed for anti-magic energy weapons required a vast array of processes and expertise. First, the energy-absorbing beetles were Harvey's most crucial strategic resource. After all, they had clearly never been found in the southern border. Without heavy equipment like the alchemical tunnel boring machine, no force could drill deep beneath the divine spine mountains to locate the beetle nests. Secondly, soul transfer technology. Although the Alchemical Exploration Society had been constantly attempting to break through it, it had yet to be successfully cracked. let alone rapidly applied to such a groundbreaking technological innovation as the soul alchemy beast. As long as he held these two material monopolies and technological barriers, and was able to prevent them from being leaked or plundered, Harvey was fully confident that he could rest easy as a magical arms dealer in this extraordinary world for a long time to come, reaping immense profits for himself and his domain. Indeed, no matter what world, there's no business that can make a fortune faster than making war profits. But when he saw the weapons order sent by the Federation along with the magical contract, he couldn't help but burst out laughing, leaving Reiner and Asdellen, who had just returned to report on their work, bewildered. Ha ha ha. What are they thinking? The first batch of 5,000 magic bullets, that's just a small amount, and they need to solemnly sign an ancient contract and even bring dwarves and elves on board for insurance. Harvey felt that the gap between his perception of the massive arms business he had imagined was too great. What difference was there between carrying a bag of gold bars and buying a bunch of green onions at the village market? Asdellen took the order from Harvey, and after quickly scanning it, he couldn't help laughing. Maybe it's their current allocation of resources that makes it impossible to produce large quantities of anti-magic weapons. After all, bullets without guns can't provide combat effectiveness. Reiner scratched his head, puzzled. Am I not knowledgeable enough? The Federation, plus the Alchemy Exploration Society where Mr. Chris used to work, and the mining dwarves in the south, the green elves in the east, so many companies can't gather the materials and manpower to mass-produce anti-magic guns? Can they do it? If not, just give the order to me. If the military factory works in 3 shifts, I can produce 1,000 for them in half a month, as long as the material supply can keep up. Harvey smiled helplessly and shook his head. The manufacture of anti-magic weapons itself did not require any technical difficulty. He handed the finished products to the members of the Federation through the forum with the purpose of letting them boldly imitate and replicate them. After all, without absolute strength, one cannot eat the whole cake by oneself. Otherwise he will invisibly create many enemies with conflicting interests. Therefore, he was entirely pleased with the involvement of the Exploration Society and the dwarves and elves. The dwarves excelled in the mining and forging of magical minerals, the elves could provide the production and preparation of the magical reagents crucial for weapon inscriptions, and the Exploration Society possessed the continent's most sophisticated magical weapon manufacturing workshops. This constituted a perfectly established weapons production chain, reminiscent of the global manufacturing Harvey had witnessed on Earth. Similarly, distributing a share of the lucrative weapons sales profits to the exploited friendly allies would greatly alleviate their dissatisfaction and protests against the human race and the Federation. Harvey effectively bought a huge favor for both parties, creating a win-win situation in terms of both profit and reputation. The temporary inclusion of the Alchemy Exploration Society as an independent partner was intended to repay the selfless assistance previously provided by the 2MR. Mirror, as a time traveler with sound values, Harvey still needed to maintain a touch of humanity in this regard. Chapter 225, Gun of Annihilation. North of the Evil Moon Mountains, a jagged, hilly terrain lies. Damo Frankie and his entourage patrolled a makeshift camp, chatting and greeting the low-level battle mages stationed there along the way. Roughly a week had passed since he received the Union's sudden, independent combat mission and arrived here to set up camp. This hilly plateau lay less than a day's journey from the demonic supply hub on the western front of the invasion. Once over the low ridge in the distance, a clear view emerged of the vast wasteland below. Dense primeval forest, like a dark green ocean, snaked to an invisible plain. A majestic black fortress, like a giant abscess parasitizing the earth, loomed uncomfortably in the middle of the vast plain, the demonic frontier supply hub. Dozens of long supply lines stretched behind it, and from the air, the surrounding area was clearly covered in the debris of chopped and burned vegetation. Master Frankie, the scout mages we sent out last night have returned and are waiting to report back to you at the main camp. Upon receiving the notification from his personal guards, Damo Frankie nodded and immediately hurried towards the main camp. 2 scout mages, wearing the Union standard robes, were sitting in the conference tent, conversing quietly. When the commander opened the tent and entered, they immediately stood up and saluted. Sir, the demon supply lines are indeed showing signs of regrouping. This time they've sent in even more hybrid monsters. We've seen more than 10 demon beast regiments along the way. Frankie frowned and pressed on. 10? How did you get this accurate information? Can you get close to the supply lines? What about the demon cavalry scouts? The older reconnaissance mage grinned. untied the long backpack he had been carrying, and held it in his arms lovingly, stroking it. The newly issued anti-magic device is simply the perfect weapon to restrain those demon cavalry. Using the reconnaissance eye, we can spot those guys from hundreds of meters away. We only need to use concealment magic from a long distance in the dark to release the magic arrows in this weapon, which will kill them instantly, without even a chance to send out a warning signal. Another younger scout mage couldn't wait to interject. True, it's a pity that we were only issued 10 magic bows and arrows, otherwise, the demon reconnaissance teams along the number 3 supply line would probably be wiped out by us. Those scouts usually return to camp for rotation every 3 days. Now their main camp may not have discovered that a large number of scout cavalry are missing. Damo Frankie's body stiffened, and he clenched his fists and scolded with pain. Reckless. How could you use such precious things to deal with those lowest level demon scouts? Do you know how scarce this thing is? The adults in the high-level Mage regiment only get 20 or 30 magic bows and arrows per person. If it weren't for Lord Gallagher's argument, you Mage scouts would not have the qualification to touch them. High-level magic weapons that can instantly kill the berserk demon soldiers at a long distance without consuming a trace of the caster's own magic power are extremely important to them. The appearance of this powerful, transcendental magical weapon was a lifeline for the vast majority of the Union's mid and low-ranking battle mages. They themselves suffered the heaviest casualties on the battlefield between the two clans. Their casualty rate second only to the ordinary retainers, who are used as cannon fodder. Frankie's 100-man Mage reconnaissance group, however, had a distinguished record of consistently charging to the front lines, earning them special treatment. Over half of the reconnaissance mages were granted access to this weapon, and each was issued 10 magical bows and arrows to activate it. Do you know that in order to get more magic bows and arrows from the commander-in-chief, I almost knelt down and grabbed his robe and cried and begged? The old scout mage shuddered and explained repeatedly, "Sir, we are not acting recklessly. At least we have advanced to the vicinity of supply line number 3 and obtained accurate information about the enemy reinforcements." Frankie rolled his eyes and was about to continue scolding his men for their wasteful behavior when another personal guard came out of the tent and whispered in his ear, "Sir, the commander-in-chief is here at the front and is currently stationed with Master Raphael's regiment. Are you going to meet him now? The commander-in-chief is here? Isn't that also the case with a high-level Mage regiment?" Frankie stood up suddenly, a thought flashing through his mind. The Federation might be making a big move against the demon race's western supply center. The guard added quietly, "I heard that the commander-in-chief has brought a large number of magic bows and arrows that have just been delivered to Black Rock City from the rear. The Mage leaders of the other chapters have all received the news and are rushing to meet him." Frankie was shocked and shouted angrily, "Why didn't you tell me earlier? Quick! 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 Let's set out immediately to meet the commander-in-chief. If we're any later, those precious magic bows and arrows will be snatched away by the guys from the other chapters." Frankie, the only high-level spellcaster in the scout chapter, couldn't wait for his guards to gather and follow. He summoned a gust of icy wind and rushed straight into the sky, heading towards the camp of another Mage chapter not far behind. Behind the hilly plateau was a dark green mountain range. This was also a canyon and gap in the Evil Moon Mountains. It was not only a key marching route for the demon army heading south, but also a key stronghold for resisting demon invasions. The Raphael regiment, a scout Mage regiment like Frankie, was stationed at the foot of the mountain. This scout camp wasn't a temporary construction, but a permanent fortification in the form of a battle fortress, primarily designed to provide long-term surveillance of the demonic frontline. Once a magical war beacon was ignited, even Black Rock City would receive an instant warning. Despite Frankie's full-throttle spellcasting, when he rushed into the battle fortress's meeting hall, he found several of his colleagues already seated, arguing furiously. "Frankie? You're here so soon? The spell messenger I sent to notify you only just left the battle fortress not long ago?" His old comrade Raphael greeted him with a smile. Frankie rolled his eyes and ignored him. He walked straight to the commander of the scout regiment, the high-level spellcaster Andre Weiss, and saluted, saying, "Your Excellency, I have just received scout intelligence. The demons have sent at least 10 regiments of hybrid monsters from the rear supply line. They haven't launched a large-scale invasion offensive in recent months, but they have been constantly sending reinforcements to the frontline war center. I suspect there will be a big move." The scout commander Andre Weiss, who was sitting in the upper position, narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Your scout team actually advanced to the vicinity of their supply line and obtained information on their troop strength." Another gray-haired Centurion Mage officer sneered, "Frankie's scout regiment has always had the highest casualty rate among us." Without the air suppression of high-level spellcasters, relying solely on scout mages who can only advance on the ground, they are relying on the lives they have lost to obtain frontline battle reports. Frankie glared at the other person and replied with a bow, "I sent out 2 teams of scout mages. They used the newly issued anti-magic weapons to clear out most of the demon scouts entrenched on the number 3 supply line. Taking advantage of the time difference in the enemy cavalry rotation, they got to the vicinity of the supply line and obtained information. You used up all the magic bows and arrows? The secret is above, Jane. It's simply a waste of resources. Such a powerful weapon should be used in frontal combat to deal with those difficult berserker soldiers and demon priests, not ordinary demon scouts." Everyone focused their eyes on Frankie as if he were a fool, as if they heard someone using high-level magic to kill a mosquito and couldn't believe it. Commander Andre Weiss chuckled and said, "The other regiments that were assigned new magical weapons and magic bows and arrows strictly control their combat mages from using them at will. You, on the other hand, poured out most of them like water during a sudden reconnaissance of the supply line." He waved his hand, but suddenly changed the subject. "But you were right to do so. No matter how precious the weapons are, they are nothing compared to important enemy intelligence and the lives of combat mages, and I came here this time to tell you that you don't have to be reluctant to use the magic bows and arrows you have been issued. The combat unit has deployed more supplies to the front line this time, a full 30,000 magic bows and arrows, which will not only be fully equipped to the high-level mage regiments, but your scout regiment and defense regiment will also receive a lot." The mage's attendant stepped forward and handed him an anti-magic energy weapon. Andre Weiss held up the alchemical weapon in his hand, which was made of metal and mithril and engraved with a large number of energy inscriptions all over, and said loudly to everyone, "The Federation has unanimously decided to name this weapon the Spear of Annihilation, and the magic bows and arrows that activate and release energy attacks will be collectively referred to as Annihilation Bullets. In a week, more Annihilation guns and ammunition will be delivered to Black Rock City. We want to cover this anti-magic weapon in the hands of all combat mages in the Federation." Everyone in the conference hall was silent for a few breaths, and immediately broke out into more heated discussions. "Distribute to the entire army? Everyone has it? Our even low-level spellcasters who are engaged in auxiliary work qualified to use it. There is no need to guide magic power. The demon soldiers can be killed directly by pulling the trigger. Not to mention low-level spellcasters. If you let those academic losers come, can't they use it at will? Then how many magic bows, annihilation bombs will be consumed? Will the Alchemy Exploration Association be able to supply the war consumption? This will empty the Federation's coffers, huh? I don't care about that. As long as my regiment can be fully equipped and there is a sufficient supply of annihilation bombs, I can also take on the task of breakthrough reconnaissance." Damo Frankie ignored the discussions of the regiment leaders, but thought for a moment, and asked the Commander Andre Weiss, "Sir, are we going to launch a large-scale counterattack against the demon front center in the near future? Do we have to storm their central fortress?" The discussions around stopped immediately, and everyone held their breath and waited for the reply from the commander of the scout regiment. "Haha, this is indeed not a top-secret news. You should have heard about it to some extent. We will no longer carry out joint defense or combat operations with the Church and the Wizard Kingdom Coalition. From now on, the Federation will solely shoulder the combat missions on the western front of the Evil Moon Mountains, whether it is to resist the return of the demon army or to counterattack to the north of the Evil Moon Mountains." He stood up and raised the Spear of Annihilation in his hand high. "This is our greatest asset to break free from the constraints of the Church and the 7 Wizarding Kingdoms. Let everyone in the southern border countries see with their own eyes who is the real backbone of the human race, standing on the front line to resist the invasion of alien races." Next, the first large-scale counterattack mission we are about to launch is to use the high-level magic regiment as the main force, assisted by the scout regiment, to target the demon race's war supply lines 3 to 8, and cut off the raid plan. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.